Hey guys, so you're gonna see my kid probably running in the background because it's what he loves to do and he's awesome. This is a video I've been wanting to do for a while. It's called New Voices. I did a whole intro to it before and I accidentally left my whiteboard right behind me that has like all the secrets of everything we have planned in DC for the next like year and a half right over my shoulder here, so I will make this really brief. But yeah, it's called New Voices, and I wanted to put it up a few weeks ago, but I screwed it up being the worst YouTuber in the world, where I used QuickTime screen record and audio record, and they move at different speeds apparently, and so I had to get my neighbor to help me fix it. So here it is. I'm really excited to post it. As an intro to it, I've been lucky enough over the years to be able to teach comic book writing at a number of places. A few colleges, Columbia, NYU, Sarah Lawrence, and then a school out here, but I also got to teach it for DC. They let me develop a talent development workshop with them for writers coming in. So I did that for 3 or 4 years running, and I've just gotten the chance to work with so many great people. I feel really, really lucky. I'm easily as proud of that as anything that I've written. And I'm lucky enough to have been a small part in the trajectory of people that I now look up to, and that I'm sure learned a lot more from me in class than I learned from them. But I'm still really proud to have been a part of their story in any way. People like James Tynan IV, Marguerite Bennett, Matt Rosenberg, Joel Jones, Tony Patrick, who I did Signal with, Aaron Gillespie, Challengers, Chris Sebela, Vita Ayala, Mags Visaggio, just on and on, Ryan Lindsay, Joey Esposito, Amy Chu, just Sanya Anwar. I could go on and on and on. I'll post a thing about that. It will hopefully appear somewhere over here in the space in which my kid has now stopped running. I wanted to do one on New Voices for 2 reasons. One, just because I wanted to get a chance to sort of celebrate work that I think spans the whole spectrum of comics right now, by people I really like. So the 4 people I'm going to be talking to today, Chris Sebela, Aaron Gillespie, Mags Visaggio, and Vita Ayala, have work that's really from different neighborhoods of comics, even though they all do stuff in kind of all areas and have potential stuff coming up in all kinds of different neighborhoods of comics. Aaron is doing kind of straight ahead superhero stuff right now. Chris is doing kind of big bombastic indie stuff. Vita is doing really interesting cutting edge personal indie stuff, and Mags is doing really sort of groundbreaking stuff, I think, in the superhero world with Eternity Girl, and then she has some really interesting stuff coming up both in the indie world and in our realm, licensed stuff. So they kind of cover a lot of different bases, and I wanted you to get to see their work and check them out because I think it's really exciting. But I also wanted to do this because I've tried to frame each sort of video around a different aspect of writing craft or around the experience of being a writer. And for me, this one is largely about the kinds of things it takes to break in, the kinds of struggles we all go through, because I know there are a lot of aspiring writers out there who think that it's bewildering, it's mysterious, how do you break in, what's the path, or wonder, is it easy, is it hard? And the bad news is, I think as this video will show, and it would show with anybody I picked, it's hard. There's always going to be a struggle. But the good news is, even though all the paths are really different, I think, if you stick with it and you love it, it becomes something that you can do, and it's the best job in the world if you get it. So it's also something where I think there's kind of a myth sometimes that people just get in, or the right people or something happens and you luck out. But honestly, I wanted to do this too because I think what it shows is that across the board, regardless of who I had talked to, whether it's, James, Marguerite, anybody, we're all in it for love of comics. I know that this is a moment when a lot of us disagree around what kinds of comics we like, the direction of the industry, all those kinds of things that are healthy, big, crazy arguments to have. But I think one thing that can unite us is the love of comics and the fact that anybody that works in this industry or gets in or wants to get in doesn't do it for money, doesn't do it for celebrity. I mean, those things aren't in it, and not only aren't they in it, but it takes a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice, a lot of hardship, but we love doing it because we love comics. Everyone loves being immersed in the crazy storytelling world that comics provides. So hopefully this video works to that end as well, as something that shows that, we should, regardless if somebody's making stuff that is totally for you, totally not for you, that there's a way of at least appreciating the fact that even if we differ in terms of our tastes, differ in terms of our aesthetics or projects or ideology or any of it, all of us are here in this community as creators, as fans, and that for love of comics. So I hope you enjoy it, and I don't know, let me know. Thanks. All right, kind of. So if we kind of imagine we're starting right now, what I would say is, so these are four incredible writers, incredible talents in comics that I'm really, really grateful to get to talk to tonight. I completely fucked up our first talk, and we had this great conversation for like 2 hours, and then I didn't record any sound. And at the end of this video, maybe I'll put like 30 seconds of it, or 10 seconds, 5 seconds, so you can see it, just to see how badly I messed it up and how great they were. So I'm very, very grateful to do it again. And honestly, all four of them were in the workshop I got to do for DC, but I probably learned more from you guys than you did from me. And to watch your careers take off now is just such a joy. It's just a tremendous pleasure. And I'm very, very honored to have you on the channel with me. So, you want to introduce yourselves just so people can put kind of a face with the name and the work that I was describing before? Do you want to, on my screen it goes Vita, Mags, Chris, and then Aaron, so I'll just do it that way. Is that cool? All right, so Vita, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Vita Ayala. Like Scott said, I went through the DC Writers Workshop, and now I write comics for a living. I write comics like The Wilds and Submerged. I've had the opportunity to write characters like Wonder Woman, whom I absolutely adore. So that's kind of what I do. If you know me from the internet, I'm sorry, but also.
All right, Mags, how about you?
Hey, I'm Mags Visaggio. I also write comics for a living, thank God, although I still have my day job. You probably know me from Eternity Girl, which just wrapped up at DC. And Kim and Kim, which is kind of like my big, flashy project. I've done a bunch of other things. I've done some Rick and Morty stuff. I've done just kind of been all over the place. And I actually just got the opportunity to write a Superman story, which was just an absolute dream come true because Superman was my very first comic. So
you have to send it to me. Brian was telling me how great. Bendis was telling me how good it is. So
yeah, no, hit me up. I'll shoot you the PDF.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait. All right, Chris.
Hey, I'm Christopher Sebela. I write comics and other things that are stupider. Right now I'm doing 2 books at Image, Shanghai Red and Crowded, and a book at Black Crown called House of Muck. And then I'm just, I don't know, I've kind of written for all the publishers at one point or another, and now I'm just kind of focusing on creator-owned stuff.
Yeah, Shanghai Red and Crowded are both like 2 of my favorite books on the stands now. They're so great. Yeah, and The Wilds and Submerged as well. Eternity Girl is blew me away from Young Animal, and again, and Aaron, and your work on New Challengers too. I owe you huge because I feel like a lot of the time with something like that, people are always like, "Great job, Scott." I'm like, everything wrong with the book I did, everything good about it you did. So I'm very, very grateful to you.
Well, I appreciate that. It's been fun.
So yeah, so do you want to introduce yourself and just say some of the stuff you've worked on and what you're working on and all that?
Sure. My name is Aaron Gillespie. I write New Challengers at DC. As Scott just mentioned, I just had a couple issues of Green Lanterns come out, and I also currently doing some licensed stories for WWE over at Boom.
I saw those, man. I'm a huge WWE fan. My kid, he's like, it's such a shame. He's like starting to phase out of it, which is breaking my heart. But when he was like seven until like 11, he really loved it. He's 11 now. Like, he loved it, and we went to a couple matches. And because a lot of them are comic fans, because what you realize is, you realize that like people with more sort of not transient like they're homeless, but like transient like, you know, people that have to travel a lot, and people that are in the military a lot, like people that have to move around a lot. Often you find like a big comic fandom with them because the regularity of serialized storytelling, it gives them sort of a constant, is what some of them, I don't know, have said to me. And so you'll find it like with people that tour or whatever. And so wrestlers, there's like a big comic fandom. And when we went, I guess a couple of the people found Cody Rhodes, and a couple of the other people found out we were going, Xavier Woods, and they were like, oh, if you want to come to the VIP thing, you can come to the VIP thing. And so I took my kid, and sorry to go off down a rabbit hole, but I'm so enamored of the fact that you're getting to write those books. But we went and saw it in Bridgeport, and they took us to the break room in the middle, like they gave us great seats, and then they took us to the break room in the intermission. And I walked in, and what you realize is because you see them all on TV next to each other, you don't realize the ratio of how huge they are. But when you go into a room full of them, it is like a land of giants, where you're like, that's Big Show, and he's 7 feet. Like, you're just like, it's just incredible. And they were so nice to my kid. They were awesome. They gave him like all this swag. He left with like 1 million things on. He had all the John Cena stuff all over him. John Cena was super nice to him, and it was great. So I'm very envious. You're cooler than me to my kid, or what would have been to his 9 or 8-year-old.
Yeah, my daughters and I watch it quite a bit, and when they found out I got to do a Finn Balor story, they were pretty excited. And then Finn Balor Instagrammed about my story, and they thought that was the coolest thing ever.
I know, it's funny how it's like my kids, I keep expecting them to be like, we only like Marvel, Dad, you know, or whatever it is that you do, that they just don't like anything, you know, whatever. But they're coming around. They both. The other day, it made me so emotional when my older one, he's wanted to be a writer for a while, but I think it's mostly because he thinks you don't have to fucking wear clothes. You know, he told me when I was going to pick him up, the other day I was like going to take him down to the bus, and he was like, Dad, why are you getting dressed up? And I was like, these are jeans, I'm just getting dressed. You know what I mean? But in his mind, like, you don't have to wear anything but pajamas, but he wants to be a writer. And my little one the other day was like, well, I want to be an artist so we can be a team. And I was so moved, where I was just like, I know, I was like, I'm just going to farm this shit out. You know what I mean? Just like do a little cottage industry with my kids. But no, it's great. You know, when your kids like what you do, it's amazing. So, all right. So one of the things I wanted to kind of focus on today, other than just sort of the great work you're doing, is what it's like to be, you know, breaking in, being sort of an emergent voice in comics today, the struggles, the triumphs, like the things that are awesome about it, the things that you have to sacrifice in a lot of ways. Because I think a lot of people that follow me want to be creators, you know, and have sort of, it's very sort of mystifying, like the road to do it, or the, you know, the path, or how you become a professional writer, in particular, a professional artist in comics. So I wanted to ask you kind of how it happened for you, and start with sort of your inspiration for, you know, what made you want to write comics as a kid. Was there a book? Was there a moment? Was there something that made you feel like, this is what I'd like to do? Even if it wasn't when you're a kid and when you're, you know, a young adult or anything. Like, what was it that sort of sparked your inspiration to want to do this crazy job? So, Vita, you're sort of, again, first on my thing if you're up for it.
Sure, why not? We should go in backwards order next time.
Yeah, I'll flip it. I'll do it. Aaron, you'll get it twice. It'll be like, and then back the other way.
For me, what made me want to write comics, or what was my first comic?
Whichever you feel like, yeah.
Right now. I guess they're kind of similar. For me, later on, when I realized that I could write comics and not have to draw comics, which is a whole nother conversation. it was way too late in life when I started looking at the credits. I was like 19. I was like, oh, there are separate people that make these things. That's weird. Cool. Maybe I can do this. But it was seeing someone that was not exactly like me, but seeing someone that was closer to like me than what I was used to seeing in media. So when I was 19, Gotham Central was coming out in singles, and Renee Montoya was incredibly important to me.
Yeah.
She's my favorite character in comics. She was the first lesbian Latina character that I'd ever seen that wasn't, and I've told this story before, so I apologize, but that wasn't played as a joke or wasn't, I mean, she's a complex character and she has her like issues, but she wasn't a negative portrayal in the way that I was used to seeing. She was a complex character who had depth and issues and was trying to do the right thing and often like stumbling along the way. And I just remember thinking like, oh, this is what it feels like to see myself in something. I've gone way too long without like really connecting on multiple levels with a character, because before then, you know, I was a big TV person and a big comic and book person, so there were little pieces of myself that I would see, but that was the first time that I saw a lot of myself in a character, and I was like, oh, I don't want anyone that's like me not to know what this feels like, you know, for this long. I want to see if I can put myself in things. And then relating back, and again, I've told this story before, so I apologize, but...
Well, there's no sound on it, so nobody heard it. They just saw you lip-syncing it by showing.
Yeah, so. Just like a lot of like hand gestures. The first comic that I remember getting was a Wonder Woman comic, and I, at the time, assumed that Wonder Woman was Puerto Rican for various reasons. And I remember being like, well, she doesn't look anything like me, but I'm also Puerto Rican. And I was like, oh, one of us. And my mom was like, oh, here you go. And so having that feeling of seeing myself, but realizing that I could see almost all of myself, or even eventually all of myself in comics, was kind of what really made me start thinking that it was something I wanted to do. I write for like younger versions of myself. And so, yeah.
It's weird how that happens too. I mean, I feel like for me, you know, I mean, Gotham Central, by the way, was one of the series that made me, you know, want to work in comics too. It was, I already did, but you know, Renee's relationship with Two-Face, all of it, like with Maggie, all of that stuff was some of the richest, best material, you know, in graphic literature for years. So, I mean, all that, I have that series, I have my original stuff of that series still, my first
I own it in almost every format. I lost my comics in a flood, like the singles, but like I rebought that in like softcover and hardcover, and I have the omnibus. Like that comes with me at all times.
Yeah, it's just such an amazing series. Anyone that hasn't read it that's watching this, just for character development on every level, watch it. It's basically about the Gotham police precinct and what it's like to work in Gotham with Batman active, and it really focuses on the lives of the police officers. It's just fantastic. So, yeah, but it's strange too as you get older, or as you like, you know, thinking of who you write for and what your sort of, not your audience is when it comes to demographics of like a superhero book. But I mean, I went from, when I had kids, I went from writing all about my own anxieties and that stuff to writing about what I assume will be theirs, and the same thing, you know, wanting to sort of write books that will be for them the same way I think, you know, you're saying, like as you mature as a writer, you're writing for other people too, to reach out. So that's great. Mags, how about you? Was there something that you remember as a, you know, young person being like, this was the moment, or this was the book, or this was sort of the kind of era that made me want to do this weird job?
Not really. I kind of started making comics as soon as I started reading comics. And I sort of always decided that was what I wanted to do. I remember when I was, 9 years old, Pizza did these video releases of X-Men cartoon episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And in front of each cartoon was this sort of round table with Stan Lee and Scott Lobdell and Fabian Nicieza. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I've never been clear on that. And they're just kind of talking about like the not even like the process, but kind of just like what X-Men means to them. But it was just so cool seeing these people whose job it was to bring these characters to life. And I think that's where I first got like critically aware of the fact that there's people behind these books. But I mean, I've been making comics, like I said, as long as I've been reading them. If there was anything that like really, excuse me, if there's anything that like really excited me and like got me thinking about comics as a medium and as work, it was probably Mouse.
Oh yeah.
Because Mouse isn't like anything I do. But like it's the story of a cartoonist as much as the story of the war, and that I don't know really clicked with me. Like especially like just that element of it of just the process of creating the book that I was reading, and I just got really enamored with the process, and I've sort of always been ever since enamored with the process of developing and getting the work down.
Yeah, well, I can see that in your work, honestly, from the scripts that you handed in class, and you know, I remember from your Harley story, all of it. Like, it's very sort of tactile, where you feel as though the comic you're reading is not about the process of making the comic, but there's something intrinsic to the story that's very raw and very much about sort of what the writer is going through in a way that when you get the right character and you sort of have the right book, feels immediately very, very visceral, which is why I love Eternity Girl.
I definitely mine my life a lot for themes. Like, I'm working on a book right now that's all about my divorce. I've done, you know, a few different things that are kind of like my perspective on being, you know, what it was like for me to be a teenager. Eternity Girl is about my experience of going through depression.
Yeah.
And I just found that's been like really valuable. I used to complain that I felt like I couldn't write because I had to live. Like when I was in college, I was like, what do I have to say about anything? I haven't done anything or gone anywhere or been anywhere. And now here I am, you know, a dozen years later, and you know, I've gone in and out of seminary. I've gotten married, gotten divorced. I've transitioned. Like I've been through a lot, and it's just like interesting to find a way to filter that through again through the process, through the structure of comics, and to like watch the big idea get purified into like a simple idea.
Yeah, exactly, and that's one of the things that I think is so amazing about comics is that it's so it's just it hits you the visual and the sort of the literary aspect of it creates such an immediate experience where, you know, reading the words, like when you're reading prose, your mind has to kind of create everything imaginatively, but this is so immediate, and when you're talking about stuff that has a vision emotionally, psychologically, like I think all your guys' work does, it suddenly creates this immersive world, you know, that allows for a reader to sort of be enveloped by it emotionally and, you know, intellectually, all of it so quickly. So it's one of the things that I love about. I could easily, if you gave me a comic by each of you, I would know who wrote what very quickly, like that. Not just by sort of what it's about, but by your approach to comic book writing, and that's what I love about reading young writers, and not, you know, you're all young, but I mean also like young voices reading your work, because to me it's very, very visionary in that regard. So yeah, so Chris, what about you? I know you've been around. You've been in the industry a while too. I mean, I know you from High Crimes, everything for a ways back as well. So I know that it's something that you've wanted to do for a long time and been working at for a long time.
I kind of came into it in a weird way because I started out writing prose, and I wrote like 2 novels that I will never show anybody, and I could just never. I mean, that was a problem. I could never finish because once I finished, then I would have to actually enter the process of finding an agent and submitting it and all that shit that I don't understand. But I'd been reading comics all my life, and mostly it was me getting over my snobbery, I guess. Because I thought, like, well, I want to be a writer, but like, I want to be an important writer, and so I have to write an important book or something, and it took me several stages to like first embraced genre as a, like, you can make something great in genre, like, it doesn't matter what the subject matter is. And then eventually, like, it was like, well, comics makes more sense to me because, you know, like, they're in small chunks. Like, you can't screw around and just, like, you know, waste a month goofing around on something because somebody's going to want it. So that was the biggest reason I think I finally, like, dove into comics. I mean, my relationship with reading comics, you know, started as a kid, and then I think I quit in high school because that didn't seem very cool, and then then I realized that wasn't cool, so then in college I came back to them, and then I think I quit, like, one more time after that, but comics, I just kept coming back to comics, and everybody I knew was in comics, and, like, I'd already kind of met everybody, so it seemed stupid to me to, like, I'm going to try and break into this industry where I don't know anybody or how anything works, or I can go work with my friends and write comics. Like, it was just mostly, like, giving myself permission to actually pursue it instead of just being like, well, that would be cool, but how am I going to pay my rent?
Yeah,
So
well, I mean,
like,
that's one of the things I want to ask you guys about too. Is sort of what?
I said, pay your rent with comics.
Yeah, or I mean, like, I mean, that's one of the things I want to talk to you guys about too. Is that, you know, comics. I mean, there were a lot of lean years for, I think, most of us. Like, you know, and what you sacrifice, how you sort of make a living, how you make a life doing this when there isn't the kind of job security there is for a lot of other things. You know what I mean? Like, it is hard. It is like it's one of those things I remember when I got married, just saying to my wife, like, I will never be the one that has a steady paycheck, but I will always love what I do, and I promise, like, I study it all the time. I'm good at it, I think. But you know, those kinds of things that being a writer, being an artist, like, you know, that you have to sort of commit to and sacrifice along the way, and the kinds of, you know, the shitty lean years too. So I feel like, you know, we can get ugly with it as well. Why not, right?
Sure.
Aaron, so you, and then maybe what we'll do is, like, go back the other way, like Vita said, so we can almost, like, loop back around. But I'll ask you, like, what kind of inspired you to want to do this in the first place? And then secondly, almost, what was your first break? Like, what was the moment you were like, I'm trying this, I think I can do it? You got sort of some encouragement from someone that was like, all right, I'm doing this professionally.
So first, how I decided I wanted to get into it. I wanted to very quickly, when I discovered comics, I wanted to get into them, but I didn't think I could. I grew up in a very, very small, insulated town in Iowa, like 800 people, small. And it was surrounded by other towns exactly like it, and they were just dead-end towns. Very closed-minded, just didn't have much to offer anyone, and I grew up very poor. And so I couldn't buy comics, but one time I was at a flea market, and I saw a seller had a rack of dime boxes. So every comic in it was a dime. And I thought, that's the coolest thing ever, because I can get a lot of comics for not very much money. It was full of Joe Kubert, Bob Conager war comics, like Sergeant Rock, Unknown Soldier, Viking Commando, Blitzkrieg, all that stuff. And I fell in love with them immediately. To this day, war comics are my favorite comics, and I think a dream project would be to get to do one of those World War II characters. So I quickly fell in love with those books, and my dad was a Marine in Vietnam, so I kind of used those war comics as a way to try to bond with him. And I quickly started drawing my own, just in notebooks. My mom took them away at one point because she saw what I was drawing, and it was full of Nazis getting blown apart and blood and guts everywhere, so she took them away from me. Anyway, I knew I wanted to do it, but I didn't think I could. I was in this middle of nowhere, Iowa. Nobody ever did anything in my town or anywhere around, so I just didn't think it was possible. And then when I was in third grade, I wrote a short story that got accepted to this writer's workshop program. And when you go, there were a series of electives you could sign up for. And one of the electives was a class called Panel to Panel, being taught by a college student that just got some comics work named Phil Hester. And so I went, I absorbed everything he taught me, and quickly became friends with him. I was in third grade. He was a college student. Mom thought there was something very weird about that. But regardless, I became his friend, and then over the years, worked in his studio as an assistant, an art assistant, for a lot of years. And that's kind of how I decided I could make it. You know, once I met him, and he lived 20 minutes, 40 minutes from me, and I saw him doing it, and when he got his first Flash annual, I thought, oh my gosh, somebody around here can do it. And that's when I realized that it was something I could pursue.
And was and when you first started to break in, like your first sort of break with it, you know, were you in your 20s? Was it something where you were like, you got something accepted, or you just decided to do your own stuff, or was it through Phil, or what was kind of the moment you were like,
Phil's given me a lot of gigs from the time I was 18 on, you know, little assistant work. Like I remember I've inked backgrounds of Green Arrow, all kinds of stuff. So not a lot of like credited stuff. But then I'd slowly get more and more work, and then I went off to college and became an artiste. So I started doing my own like mini comics that I would silk screen and hand out at cons. And then after I graduated, I worked with him in storyboarding and moved out to California to try to pursue storyboarding for a while, and just kind of meandered, like kind of aimless, not really knowing what I wanted to do. And I still love superhero comics. It's just that at the time I felt that I was kind of above them, like sort of how Chris was saying. And I got over that pretty quickly and decided that that's what I wanted to do. And Phil had created a character for an anthology being put out by Desperado Press, and he asked me if I wanted to work on it as an artist. And I said, yeah, and I love the character so much, I just blasted out a bunch of shorts for this anthology. And then the anthology got canned, and they didn't go anywhere. And then my big writing break, sorry if I'm droning on about it, but my big writing break came about 5 years ago when Phil called me up and said, hey, I'm on this book at Dynamite, and I'm thinking about heading off of it, and I'd like to hand it off to somebody. Would you want to write it? Co-write it with me, and then you can have it after I'm gone. And at the time, I was like, wait a minute, writing? Like, what are you talking about? I'm an artist, you know? But then I realized that I've been writing my own story since I was 5, 6, you know? And I think that's something that a lot of comic writers have in common, is that they're also not just visual storytellers, but just flat-out storytellers as well. And at the time, I was really struggling to be an artist because I was also a single dad and just didn't have a lot of time to have my ass in the seat at the drafting table as many hours a day as I needed to.
And you have 3 kids too, right?
I have 3 kids, yeah. And you know, I've got a graphic novel with Dennis Hopeless that was I got about 2.5 issues of it done before he took off. Chris knows. Chris and I have experience of trying to work together, and I just couldn't get the hours in. And I found that writing for me is thinking. So if I'm mowing the yard, I can be writing in my head and then transcribe it, you know, when I'm done or at night or whatever. So it just not only did I think I was good at it, but it fit into my schedule better, and I really enjoyed it. So from that point on, I knew that that's primarily what I wanted to pursue, was writing.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel like all of us wanted to be something else at one point. For me, I definitely wanted to be an artist for a long time. I had a portfolio. It's super embarrassing if I showed it to you. It's like all rip off Eric Larson, Rob Liefeld, like totally like me trying to be them. But I had it all the way through college, and that was what I wanted to do. And I just realized that, like you said, writing had more. I fell into it because it was a moment when short stories were having this big renaissance, and I didn't know how to take illustrative art classes. And you know, it's also, like you said, something that I felt fit into the kind of obsessive, weird lifestyle I had at that time too, where you could think about it when, you know, you were doing other chores, because you have the kind of brain that just won't let stuff go. So, what about you, Chris? What was the first when you sort of so we know, like, kind of, you know, when you decided you wanted to do it, but what was the moment where you were like, your break, or a mentor that helped you, or the kind of thing that was like, this is when I'm actually doing this in life, like I'm doing it?
I mean, honestly, it's when I decided to move to Portland. And
how old were you? What was it?
Hmm?
How old were you? Like, when was this in your life?
This was like 8 years ago, so
Okay.
Not that long ago. I was living in Kansas City, and just like I was freelancing as a graphic designer, and I just sort of backed into that after I got fired from my last job, and I'd managed to keep it going, but it was dying, and I didn't know. I was like, oh no, I have to get a real job again, and I don't know how to do that anymore. And I was like, well, the only thing I really know how to do is write. So I was like, I could stay in Kansas City, my money holds out, I could keep this going, or I'll take half of my savings and move to Portland and try to break into comics. So that's what I did, and then I got a writing partner who is a buddy of mine who had already put out a book at Image, and he'd kind of gotten discouraged. So I said, we should team up, because I don't know what I'm doing. You've already been through it. So we started working on pitches together, and then we sold a sequel to his first book, Screamland, to Image, and then like 2 days later, we sold a pitch to Oni, and then suddenly I was like, oh, I guess I did it. But then like the Image book got canceled 5 issues in, and the Oni book still hasn't come out yet, and I was just like, I don't know what to do now. So then I spent a couple of years trying to break back into comics. And it wasn't until High Crimes, which was my Hail Mary, I got an offer from Monkey Brain, which was, on Comixology only, which was a pretty new concept. And there was no money in it, but they said, pitch us the book you want to do the most. So I pitched them that. They said yes. Like 2 weeks later, I accidentally ran into Ibrahim and pitched him the book, and he just so happened to be looking. Like, everything just kind of came together, and we got really lucky, because that was the book that, like, the right people read it, and suddenly then I started getting work, and people started answering my phone calls.
But that's the best advice. I love that he said that to you, where it was like, pitch the book that you want to write the most. I mean, that was what Doyle at Vertigo said to me. I had like 5 pitches, and I was trying, when I first got the chance to pitch to Vertigo for American Vampire, and it was all kind of like, what's the most commercial book? What can I sell them? How do I break in, please? Because I'm broke. I'm borrowing money from my parents. I'm teaching. I'm tutoring. I'm doing all this different stuff. I've been rejected a million times, but this is all. I'm still going to stay with it. It's all I'm going to do. And he's like, here's your chance. Like, what do you have? And I just remember trying to think of like the thing I thought they would like. And then when he said that, he was like, just pitch the thing that you would love to write the most. That was American Vampire, which out of the stuff I had in my pocket, I don't know was the most commercial or the most high concept at all, especially because it was right when Twilight and all that shit was out. So
right.
It was really, nobody was looking for vampire stuff, but the fact that he gave that advice means the world to me to this day. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I'm so close to him now, that he was very much just like, I don't care if, Twilight is huge or whatever. And it was so big that I remember like the Stephen King, when he came on to American Vampire, we asked him like if he wanted to like suggest any ads or anything like that for it, or blurbs, and he was like, all he wanted to do was one ad that was like a bunch of dead sparkly vampires, and that was it. And our vampire Skinner standing on top, and it was just saying, I don't fucking sparkle, and that was it. And we were like, we can't do that. But anyway, sorry. the reason to go down that rabbit hole is just to say that advice is the best advice anybody can give anybody as a emergent writer. I think just write the story that you would like to pick up and read the most today. So anyway, Mags. So what was the moment that you felt like this is, my break? This is what I can do this. Was there a mentor, or was there sort of a watershed moment when you were like, you know what, I think I know that I always want to do this no matter what, but this is the moment that I think I'm starting to make headway career-wise?
I mean, I think we all went through that process of banging our heads against the wall for ages. Like I said, I've been making comics for as long as I've been reading comics. So I've been making comics in one form or another since like 1992 or 93. And I did so on a semi-serious hobbyist basis with a friend of mine in college and after college. And it was in 2012 after I left seminary, and I was like, I have lost like the direction for my entire life, and I don't know what there is next.
Can I ask you really quickly about that? Just because, can I ask you about sort of, did you grow up wanting to do comics, and then you found you had like a calling with seminary at a certain point?
Well, like I grew up not really know what I'm not really thinking about a career, because that just seemed so abstract. There were just things that I liked, and I just thought I figured, well, I'll end up wherever I end up. I spent a lot of time trying to like draw comics all through like elementary and high school, and realized I wasn't very good. Converted to Catholicism in high school and decided I was going to be a priest, and that didn't pan out for obvious reasons. And so I left seminary. I was like, okay, I don't know what I want to do anymore. But comics has always been there. Comics is always something that like I've always wanted to do. And so I did some self-pub. I started working with Heather Antos before she was ever at Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's the closest thing I would have to like a mentor per se. And then I learned a ton about writing comics from her, while she was learning a ton about editing comics from Scott Alley.
Yeah.
So it worked out really well. Like, she was getting the lessons in how to edit and then imparting those immediately to me. And so I sort of learned at the foot of this like big time editor, which I thought was really cool. And I mean, she like taught me so much about just structure and planning and page planning and all that stuff. And so I did a self-pub book in 2014 or 2015 called Andrew Jackson in Space. I did some anthology pieces here or there, and I just I just couldn't get my foot in the door anywhere with anything. I had I started to make friends with some pros like Matt Wilson in particular, and people were like making intros for me at publishers, and nothing was going anywhere. And I was like, I guess I'm just not good at this. And then it only ever takes like the one book. It only takes the right pitch. And Kim and Kim was well received but rejected at Dark Horse and Oni, and then Black Mass picked it up, and that was the book that got me the attention. That was the book that the right people read. I used to be a lot like Chris when Chris was talking about how like he wanted to be like the important writer, and for me it was kind of the same thing. That what let me do the work that resonated was when I finally let go of that. When I finally was like, I don't have to be a genius. That's not necessary. All I have to do is do something that people find entertaining. And
and
pressure off.
Yeah, and speaking to that, like I think one of the things that, for me at least, was like a huge lesson with that is that what you realize is that it's not doing something important or, because I went through the same thing. I like, when I was doing prose and all of that too, I remember like I had a moment, I had sold a book already and I was doing my short story collection and I was trying to sort of show off and do all of this kind of linguistic craziness, and there was a moment I was really depressed. We had just gotten married, me and my wife, who's asleep upstairs, and we moved out here to Long Island, and she was in med school, and I was, broke, but I had this book deal looming that I thought would be lucrative if I could just finish the book. And we only had one car, and she used it to go to work, so I would walk along the road to go to the grocery store with bags. It was was a terrible time where I had misjudged everything. I remember I felt so fake. I was just writing to try and be important and try and say these lofty things. And what I realized at a certain point working on this book, which became this story collection I did, Voodoo Heart, was if you just put yourself on the page and you just make it you, and all of the things you love, whether they're silly or stupid or bombastic or crazy or, over the top, or they're literary, personal, all that. Putting yourself on the page is the key to letting go of the hang-ups that you have that keep you from being a real writer in some way, at least for me. Like it was realizing that I just had to write the stuff that made me feel like I might be a bad person or a good person, all of it. Like the stuff that made you vulnerable, and that was it,
Yeah, so something like Kim and Kim, for me, was a really important project because it for me, it was all about not getting in my own head. So, like, if you look at the original Kim and Kim miniseries, it's super chaotic. It's just me saying yes to whatever dumb idea popped in my head, because if I didn't do that, I would have overthought the hell out of it.
Yeah.
And now I've learned how to do that balance, and, like, my work since then is more restrained. But it was really important for that book, and for my growth as a writer, to just spend some time doing the things that I thought would just be like bonkers randomness, because otherwise I was just gonna fall back in the same old habits of just overthinking and saying no to every idea. I had this one book that I was working on that I got super caught up. This is years ago, where I got super caught up in a logistical element of the plot. Where I was like, I've made the evil empire, so technologically advanced. Why would these people be able to hide it all? And I couldn't solve that problem, and the entire story collapsed for me because I couldn't just let myself go. Who cares?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that was when I was writing Black Mirror. When I started out in comics, one of the things that was so interesting to learn, because it was the same moment. I mean, all of it happened for me at the same moment when I was like, sort of, finishing the book, the prose book, and starting to work in comics, and like learning who I was between 2006 and 2009. But exactly what you're saying, where I feel like for me, it was that same thing of just recognizing that, allowing yourself to say the only thing that's really important is the emotional truth of a story. The plot, obviously, it has to hang together, but comic science is so, I asked my wife's a doctor, and so I'll call her all the time. She's always gets mad at me because she'll be at the hospital and I'll be like, bring, she's in the ER, and I'm like, I have a question for you, a science question. If gamma rays hit Bruce Wayne's wrist, like, would he, it's like click. You know what I mean? It's like there's no sort of specialty for comic book science, but it is a blast when you go to like doctor parties and you're like talking to a cardiologist and you're sort of like, well, sir, the vampire heart doesn't function the way the blah blah blah. But anyway, the point is, just like you're saying, Mags, the thing to learn is almost that the plot mechanisms, when you get hung up on them, they're important, and the math of it is important, like beat to beat, the causality of stuff when it comes to action and mystery and all of those things. But people will forgive you mistakes in that department. Like I realized that on Black Mirror, if there's really an emotional heart to the whole thing, if it's about something that matters to you, and it's a personal story, and it's intimate, and it says something, then they'll sort of, hopefully you get it all right, and the plot hangs together well too, and all the sort of bolts and screws are in tight. But even that said, they will sort of, they'll give you some elasticity if it's about something that matters to you, Anyway, all right, Vita. So your big break, or the moment that you were like, I can do this, somebody to, helped you get in, like, when was it that you were like, I'm taking this fork in the road and I'm doing this thing, I don't care if I don't care what anybody says, I'm doing this?
I guess for me, my break came in like 3 stages. So the first stage was me learning how to read, which I did much later than most of my peers at that point. I didn't learn how to read until I was about 10 years old.
Oh, really?
I'm a very good bullshitter, and I could skate by on my bullshit, and I did. But then when I was 10, I was switched into Catholic school, which anyone who's ever gone to Catholic school understands that it's much more advanced in terms of where they are academically than public school. And I could not skate by on nonsense anymore. And so I had a week. I taught myself how to read in 2 weeks. And then I realized that I could write something, and I began to obsessively write. And since I was about 10 years old, I've carried a notebook and I've written every single day. Not necessarily anything in particular, but I'm very big into world building and character building and all that kind of fun stuff. So by teaching myself how to read, I taught myself that I should be writing at all times. And then the second stage was I worked at Forbidden Planet on and off for about 10 years. But in 2012, oh yeah.
The
for a long time.
Yeah, down that was my store when I was growing up. Actually, the one the old version though, when it was like the upstairs downstairs. Do you remember that one?
In the corner. Oh yeah, I worked
exactly.
At that spot too.
Right,
yeah.
right. Where it was like the toys and the sort of models and all of the kind of Japanese robots and stuff downstairs, and Godzilla upstairs was the comics, like the. Yeah, no, that was my dad took me there every Wednesday. That's literally where I would go. So I grew up down there.
I lived in Alphabet City in the Lower East Side, and then it was a straight shot walk. And so when I was allowed to wander around by myself, I would end up at Forbidden Planet. But yeah, so flash forward to 2012, and I'm working there. And Matt Rosenberg, who is one of my best friends, was also working there, and he has always been many steps ahead of me in terms of doing what he does, which is write comics. And I would come in every day and I would write in the basement for a couple of hours before my shift because I couldn't write at home. As I said, I have a big family, and also I was living post-college and went home because that's what you do when you have a lot of debt. And so I was living in on a couch, and so I was like, I need somewhere where I can write. I went to Forbidden Planet and I'd write every day, and Matt was like, you should show someone what you're writing. I was like, absolutely not. There's no way. I too came to writing mostly through prose because I didn't know how to get co-creators yet, and so I didn't want to kind of burden someone with me learning the process yet. So I mostly wrote prose and some scripts, both comic and TV, like screenplays. And he was like, well, one day he was like, yeah, I talked to my buddy and you're going to pitch to him. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That's not happening. He's like, no, I did. So it's happening. That's cool. I was like, oh, okay. And so I ended up pitching some stuff to Black Mask, which they were very excited about. And neither thing ended up actually happening, as happens with comics all of the time. You just have to be patient. But because of that, I had a bunch of scripts. And again, Matt Rosenberg, who is my fairy godmother of comics, began introducing me to everyone that he knew. Artists and other writers and editors and all these people. And he introduced me to Sarah Miller, who then asked me to submit to the writing workshop. And so the third stage of my kind of breaking into comics and me finally being like, maybe I can do this, is being accepted to the workshop. Because, I mean, for one thing, to have someone go out on a limb and vouch for you in an industry that they're also trying to work in, that says something to you. And I've never had high self-esteem, but I pay attention to what other people are doing. And so I was like, well, if he believes in me this much, then I'm not going to let him down. And if there's one thing that I can say I have, it is a pretty intense work ethic. It's just how I grew up. And then being in the workshop and talking to people that were way, way advanced in terms of like what they were doing, like yourself, Scott, but also just like Chris and Mike and Matt, although I give him shit all the time, so hopefully he doesn't watch this video where I'm talking nice about him. And having the feedback that I got on my homework, I was like, I'm going to give it my all. because the only thing that has been consistent in my life, I've had many jobs and I've performed them very well, and I could have stayed at any one of them, but the one thing that has always called to me has been writing. And writing comics gave me this joy that I didn't get in the process of writing prose. Once the prose was done, I was like, great, I feel great about this. But the process of writing comics and talking to other people about it and working with artists brings me this intense joy. And I was like, I can't make myself miserable by forcing myself not to do this. I have to try. If I fail, fine, but I have to try. And then my first published work was through DC. It was the New Talent Showcase, and I got to write Wonder Woman. I collaborated with Kari Randolph, who is incredible.
Yeah, Kari's great.
And yeah, I mean, I still don't know if I can do it, but I'm doing it. So, like, I don't have a choice. It's one of those things where it's like, it's going to happen until it doesn't. But I don't know if I can ever give it up, so I guess it's just going to keep happening.
You're doing great. Submerged, I adored Submerged and The Wilds. You know how much I loved it. So, you know, all you guys are doing great. Honestly, like, I'm prouder of being a part of your trajectory, as little as that is, than, like, I'm as proud of that as anything I've written. So it really means a lot to me that you guys would speak to me about, you know, being new writers in the industry and all that stuff too. So, you know, but I remember when you were in the class too. Was that when you were working at the museum?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've never not had like two jobs. This is the first time in my life where I'm not working at least two jobs. But when I was in the workshop, I was working security at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I was working night security, so I would do that at night and then go write for a bunch of hours. And then was it Wednesdays that we did?
Yeah, it was Wednesdays.
I just wouldn't sleep. Like that day, I was just like, I'm up for 29 hours, and that's it.
No, you were committed. I so love the idea of that job, about getting to like imagining getting to walk around the Met at night and all of that. My wife, like,
it was awesome.
Yeah, she worked at the Museum of Natural History when she was a grad. And she was like, oh, well, you know, the museum is actually only 1/4 public and 3/4 of it is all research. And so one time she got me in at night and we went and saw all the lockers with all the bones of the different dinosaurs and stuff. It was crazy. So
there's all kinds of weird stuff that definitely goes into my writing.
Right?
From my time at the Met. Yeah, I mean, the place is A, haunted, and B, way bigger than you'd think. And the amount of stuff that isn't on display is really bananas. But I would also bring a notebook with me on post, and when I had free time, when it wasn't imperative that I be staring at, a screen to make sure something wasn't going wrong, I would be writing. And I wrote most of The Wilds at work at the Met, which was a lot.
Yeah. And again, I can't tell you how much I love that book. Just the whole idea that one of the things that I love about all your work is that everything that I've read is high concept and very much like, has an elevator pitch on one level. And then on the other, it's so layered and so much your own, so like something like The Wilds, if anyone is out there watching this and is thinking about picking up a new comic, it's literally like a post-apocalyptic, viral adventure story. But the sort of the infection that's going around the world makes people almost like these natural flower sort of zombies. And it focuses on this one protagonist who's a runner who sort of lives in this community that's falling apart and moves material back and forth in and out of the community. And it focuses on her and her relationship with somebody there. And it's great. So, again, like, I know you're like, it's personal, it's this and it's that, but it's also like badass and huge. You know what I mean? And same, like, I would say, like, for you, Mags, like with Eternity Girl, as much as it's like a very personal story about depression, and one of the things that I think was so moving about it was that it's literally about a character whose physical form is almost impossible to hold for her, so she's falling apart, and the desire or the kind of the sort of I guess just the sort of resolution to the fact that she's existing in between these different physical states is, deeply sad, that she can't find this kind of physical form that will hold is really intimate and personal and all of that. On the other hand, she's fighting giant cosmic forces and is part of the kind of DCU tapestry, and it's big, in that way too. It has that giant epic scope. And for you, Chris, like Shanghai Red and Crowded are are highly like high concept. Both of them I could recognize as you I think they're both about people that find themselves in situations that are almost sort of overwhelmingly predatory. Like, the protagonist of Shanghai Red, if you're not reading it or you haven't picked it up, it's about a woman. Sorry to spoil the first issue. The surprise is that she's a woman. But it's about sort of somebody that works on a ship that has been shanghaied onto this ship and sort of causes a mutiny and wants to take over the ship. And it takes place in kind of the high days of piracy in that way. And then similarly, Crowded, which is great, is about a woman who finds that her assassination has been crowdfunded, and she doesn't know who. There's an app that's like, offers a certain amount of money for the death of Target. And so she doesn't know who set her up and what happened. And so there are people that find themselves at the mercy of circumstances almost beyond their control, but who are, problematic, interesting characters with sort of a mission in that way. And, for you, Aaron, I know your love of like the big, the cosmic, also the sense of characters that I think, again, find themselves in circumstances that are sort of overwhelming, but find that kind of inner strength to overcome them. So it's really interesting to see, I think, all of you guys do work that I could recognize as yours in different sort of medium, all at once, like superhero, indie, sort of curated label, all of that stuff. So anyway, I feel like and now I was going back this way. Should I go back? Should I double down on you, Vita, or I can go back to Aaron as well and ask you now that you've broken in and that stuff, what are some of the things that you find both, I don't know, like for me, I want to kind of communicate to people like what it's like to be a working comic book writer. You know what I mean? For you, like what is it that is really difficult about it? What is it that's inspiring about it? What are the kind of daily struggles with it? I mean, for me, I remember when I was breaking in, it was always, how am I going to balance my day job with what I do with this? And, how am I going to kind of make a life for it and all that stuff, So you've broken in, you have your first comics. What is it like? I don't know. I'm sorry if that's such an abstract question. I just mean, what is it that, and we don't have to go in a row. Why don't we just have a talk? Like anybody that wants to talk, just talk. But I mean, for me,
I nominate Chris's tribute.
All right, that's fine.
Go ahead.
I'll lead it. I mean, the good parts are most of it. Like writing is a pretty solitary pursuit, but working in comics means that you're not all alone. You're part of a team, so you have artists that you're collaborating with. If you're lucky, you have an editor. Like you have people that you can talk to about this thing that you're working on, and you're all in it together. So that like while you're suffering, beating your head over a script, like that your artists are suffering trying to figure out how to translate what you wrote. Which I don't know. It's like going to war with somebody, or like getting into a relationship with someone. Like you just like go through all these big things that like are only huge to you and to them, but it like bonds you in a weird way. The downside is like just forever having to like, I don't know. For me personally, it's like worrying like what I don't think about it a lot, but like the looming fear of like, what if suddenly the well runs dry, and like, which is why I just constantly work all the time, because I don't want to give it a chance to. So then I have a very hard time separating personal and professional life at this point. Like,
yeah,
professional kind of dominating everything at the moment.
No, comics is all encompassing. It never comes off.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Seriously.
Yeah, it's a lot to deal with. And I have been working on trying to build some sort of separation in, but literally I start every year with that's my grand resolution is I'm gonna draw a clear divide, and then by February that divide has gotten really blurry, and then by April it's gone entirely. So yeah, it's just hard to because emails come in at all hours, especially if you're working with collaborators who are overseas and stuff. Time differences, delays, it's just you're constantly having to. I mean, it depends on how involved you want to get, I guess. Because some writers will just write it and then see ya. But for your creator-owned stuff, it's you're writing it and then you're well, you're not done now. Now you have to manage this team and make sure. It's a lot to juggle, and it's pretty exhausting sometimes. But
yeah. On that note, for Vacant Queen, I ended up having to step back from the project management stuff because I'm writing 6 books right now, and there was just no way I could do all of that. And so really, I'm lucky because my artist Jason Smith has really been stepped up and taken that workload and is doing all the publisher liaison stuff and all the marketing liaison stuff. And so I just turn in my scripts and I can let it go, which is great because I have 4 books that I can't do that on.
Yeah, no, I still can't. Literally, I was out to lunch yesterday with some people who were in for Rose City, and then got an email in the middle of it from our production assistant at Image, and she's like, "Just let me know when Crowded #3 is uploaded." And I was like, "Oh shit, that's today!" It's so much on top of I'm trying to figure out scripts, and I'm trying to remember all the little tiny things I've committed to, and then it's oh right, the big giant thing of you need to send us the actual comic book so we can print it. Stuff like that can easily slip out of your head when you're trying to manage all this stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm terrible at managing all of it as well. But I think, one of the things going back to, what you were saying at the beginning too. I mean, for me, I feel there's a certain point when you realize this is what you're doing, and if you need somebody to my wife now, helps me more with sort of some of the managerial stuff with it, even though she deals with real life stuff. So it's really embarrassing to be able to talk to her and be can you help me with this and that and cons or whatever it is, and she's dealing with people that are sick and all of that stuff. You often feel you're dealing in a world of imagination, and that's it. But the logistics of it are a lot, on some level, where the sausage making of doing a comic is really multifaceted, and you have doing stuff at Image, for example, where you have the script, the art, the lettering, all that stuff is on you. But do you guys feel in some way too, I don't know, doing your stuff, is there a difference between when you do license work and when you do work for, creator owned? For me, they're almost completely inverted muscles. So for those of you that have done stuff on licensed things for DC and that, who are working on your own stuff, is it something that you feel yourself almost working at odds with your own kind of creative impulses, or is it something where you feel it's really confluent? I can definitely speak to it myself, but I want to hear what you have to say.
So I got the opportunity to do a Wonder Woman story for this year's New Talent Showcase, and I got to do that Superman thing for the Halloween anthology, and I got to do I've done some stuff over at Marvel, and yeah, it's such a completely different beast, because my natural impulse when I do storytelling is I'm really attracted to stories about failure, and not just about failure, as such, but different kinds of failure and the complex feelings of failure. And so for my Wonder Woman story, that's what I wanted to do. Is I wanted to do a story where Wonder Woman had an impossible dilemma, and she made the right call, but it still hurt because she couldn't save everybody. And ultimately, I got so much pushback because they were like, "No, you have to save the girl." Wonder Woman can't not save the girl.
Yeah.
And that was like the most jarring experience. I'm like, what are you talking about? The whole story is about her not saving the girl. That's the thing that I'm interested in. And the back and forth and trying to figure out, well, what's a way that satisfies DC and also leaves me feeling creatively like I didn't sell my soul, was just very intense. It was a very difficult process, trying to find a way to thread that needle so that it still hit what I needed it to hit, while still being a Wonder Woman story, trademark, because that's like a thing.
Yeah.
Like that's the hard part, is like trying to find a way to weave what you're interested in into what is a well-established sort of, this is what you do in a Wonder Woman story for it to be a Wonder Woman story.
Well, but also, Wonder Woman meant something to you. The same way for me, like, when I did Court of Owls, I got a huge amount of pushback. The biggest fight I ever had with DC was at the end of Court of Owls, when Batman couldn't solve the mystery of whether or not the antagonist of the story was his brother or not. At first they were fine with it, but at the end they kind of came in and said, Batman always solves the mystery. He needs to know for a fact that's not his brother, it is his brother or whatever. And I was like, no, the whole point of the story is that Gotham will always remain a bit of a mystery. And, they really came down hard on not doing that, and we had to push back. And it's exactly like you're saying, where on some level, like, you're not writing against character. You've pitched something that's on model. But the characters sometimes, it's not that they fail or they have to do poorly, but they can also be hurt. They can be vulnerable. The best stories, like the stories I remember the most, like growing up, I mean, Dark Knight Returns, he's so broken, and Year One, and Kraven's Last Hunt, and there's so many stories really take the character to a place where you feel like, God, they're really...
like all my favorite Superman stories are stories where Superman, whose, I think, greatest strength is always knowing what to do, doesn't know what to do. So, and there's so many of them are Elseworld stories, and I get that that's what makes them work. And so things like Kingdom Come, things like Red Sun,
right.
Or Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, where Superman is faced with a dilemma that he can't figure out because he's being pulled in different directions, and like he's got one part of him that wants to do it one way, and one part of him that wants to do it another, and he can't find that reconciliation. That's the stuff that fascinates me the most about Superman. And so, I mean, I don't know. It's just like working in playing in someone else's playground means playing by someone else's rules. And I guess it's just what I get for having spent so much of my life reading out of continuity stuff.
But also, I mean, I feel like that makes it interesting to me, right? So, like, people don't like to admit this, right? Yeah, and that's fun. I love puzzles and I love challenges, but also, like, oops, hold on, let me plug in my computer before you lose me completely. Not as many people like to admit this, right? But, like, I was super into fanfic when I was, like, growing up, and also as an adult. And I'm writing and reading it, but the important part is that you had all of these established rules. You had this universe that you knew so well, and the challenge was exactly that. How do I stay on character, but do something that makes sense for the universe too? You know what I mean? And I don't think that, like, I don't think it's easy. I haven't done, like, a ton, but I've done little stories here and there. I've done a couple Wonder Womans as well. I got to write, Batman Beyond, which was super, super cool because I love Batman Beyond. And I've always found a way to examine the problem or the question that I was interested in through them, because one of the things that draws me to those things is that my stories have a place there. But it's also like a relief because I don't have to come up with the universe. I love universe building. I love character building. It's one of my favorite things on the planet. It is so fucking exhausting.
It is exhausting.
Have to have the answer, and no one else can have the answer, and then having to hold that answer in your head while you do something else, and then not kind of fuck up your own continuity there. And so being able to be like, this is just who Wonder Woman is, and this is how it works. And I'm going to talk about the thing I want to talk about, but that at the end of the day, she's from Time Mascara, and this is this, and Bruce is this, and Clark is this, and they're archetypes. That's so nice.
Well, I'm sorry, go on.
No, go, please.
Well, I agree with you. I think that for me, the fun is in figuring out how to appease the editors and what the editors need for the character, and then also appease what you need for the story or the character in your own story. I find that fun, and I haven't had a lot of instances of that. I think the only one that I have had, as a matter of fact, was in class. I wrote a Batman script that was really about poverty and about class, and Batman ends up rescuing these two women that are poor, living on the streets, and it's in the middle of this hurricane and all this stuff, and I didn't want it to end with them out of the hurricane. I wanted it to end with them being pelted with water and struggling to get out, because I thought that having them get saved diminished what I was trying to say. But I also understood that Batman needs to save these people. And so it was fun for me to try to figure out how to stay true to what I wanted to say with the story, and also do what needed to be done for the character and for the editors. And I think that's the most fun, when you have to solve that puzzle.
It is. It's a really interesting box to be in, honestly. I mean, what? Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, it's such a fascinating box. I feel like they really are almost inversions of one another. Like the idea that, with, licensed characters, you're writing something that everybody already knows and loves. They love the mythology. They know it probably better than you do, which is always terrifying. But with, creator-owned, and with licensed, sort of, you're selling them on you and what you have to offer the character. On creator-owned, it's the reverse, where they kind of like you or know you in some way, but you're selling them completely on the world that you're building. And for me, the balance of working in both works. Like, I love the idea of the restrictions of licensed characters of, DC IP, where I know Batman has to behave a certain way, but how do I then, and there's certain expectations of what a Batman story is or a Justice League story. How do I work within that box to make something that's really mine, that sort of reaches beyond what you thought I was going to give you, and all of that. But if I didn't have this sort of refresher, the palate cleanser of like working on creator-owned in a way where everything is sort of the reverse, where I'm just writing something that nobody knows better than me because I made it up. So Batman, there might be like thousands of people that know him better than me, even though I've read it, as much as I can. My stuff, like American Vampire, you can't say Skinner Sweet better than me because I made him up. So that there's something that's almost just like this breath of fresh air, where you're like working on your own stuff and you're like, I know that I am the biggest expert on this because I am making it up as I go along and that stuff. So do you guys find
also like the relief going back? So it's like, it's a relief to just be able to do whatever I want. But now, like Chris said, and like Mags said as well, like, oh God, I have to worry about coordinating with the artist, if I have an editor, if I have to do this, blah, 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 marketing and all this stuff. And then the relief of going back to licensing, being like, oh, I don't have to worry about any of that stuff.
some of these middle tier publishers that, like, I'm doing things with Benoni, and they just handle it. It's great. I get all like the freedom of the creator own, but they just handle it. I just send them my files, and then my editor just puts everything together. It's great.
It sounds awesome, and also like not having to worry about necessarily all of the like. I'm dropping stuff over here. I apologize. All the like weird administrative stuff that you had no idea would be part of the process, because like coordinating with other people makes sense, but then like, making sure people get paid, or making sure that like you send the proof PDF to like people that need the proof PDF, or make sure that people get comps, like that kind of stuff, where it's like, I didn't even know that would be my job. So like whenever I have the opportunity to work like with licensed stuff, I'm like, oh man, I don't even have to set up interviews for this. Like, someone's going to email me and be like, do you want to answer 5 questions? Yeah, sure.
See, I'm really working on my first big creator-owned thing right now, and nobody's ever said that I wasn't a confident person. But at the same time, when I have an editor, I have a sounding board, a regular sounding board, and I find myself kind of clenching up a little bit on my creator-owned book, because I'm like, this is cool to me, but I don't know if this is good or not. And so I find sometimes having editor to send stuff to regularly and get feedback on appeals to me. But again, the creator-owned stuff is hugely satisfying, because I can just, if I think a story should go there, or if the story surprises me and goes somewhere, I can just do it.
Also, you can hire your own editors on Creator.
Yeah, always hire your own if you can.
Yeah, so I have editors on Shanghai and Crowded who are just friends of mine who I trusted, and they, like, I'm paying them, but they're basically just people that I trust, and I'm like, I just need somebody to read this and tell me where I'm screwing up, and it's been more so for Crowded, because it's been sort of from Jump Street, but it's been really helpful in being like, do you need this scene? What does this scene do? And I'm like, I just thought it was cool.
Yeah.
So, like, having somebody who is not as attached, and just like kick them money from the back end or something, like, or just buy them beer, like, if that works.
Well,
okay.
So let me ask you this. So now you're in best moment, worst moment, sort of your family, are they supportive? Like, is there a moment when you're like, this is, I not only, like, you can do it, like, you're doing it, you've committed to it, you've sacrificed for it, that you're sort of in it regardless. Was there a moment that you were like, this is what I've worked for, this is the pinnacle, like, I've peaked, or, not that you have, like, you have many, many years ahead of you. I'm old, you're young, you have, like, a lot of roads still. And also, I don't know if it's okay to ask, like, lowest moment, moment when you're like, even though you've made it in and you're working, where you're like, I don't know, because I have those too, believe me, like, even though there isn't really the risk that DC or Marvel or Image is gonna reject a lot of the stuff I pitch, I still have all those moments where I'm like, someone's gonna find out I'm a fraud. I was telling you guys last time, and I know I said, like, I flubbed the sound, but one of the most telling moments for me was when I was out with Vertigo, a whole bunch of Vertigo people, and Neil Gaiman was there, and we were out to dinner, and it was, I think I told this story when I was interviewing Sean Murphy, but Neil told this incredible story about how he had gone to the oldest shoe store in London, and how they had these molds of the feet of the most famous people in history, and they called the molds the lasts, and so he was like, they took him down to the place where they had the lasts of the dead, and it was like Frank Sinatra and the Queen of England, and you're like, this is exactly the story I've always wanted to hear from Neil Gaiman. Please go on, you know what I mean? Like, but at one point, he saw that I was really stressed out about some of the stuff I was doing on Batman, and he was like, whoa, what's the matter? And I told him, I'm just worried about all this stuff that I'm working on superhero stuff, and he was like, oh, Scott, right now you're worried that you aren't good enough, and pretty soon you'll be worried that you used to be better, and that's all there is. And it was that moment when it hits you and you're like, I mean, but it was also, like, almost weirdly encouraging to know that he goes through that too. So for you guys, is there a moment that you're like, this is my peak comic moment, and this is my moment that I was like, still, even though I do this, I'm the lowest moment almost, like, in your career? Or you don't have to answer that if it's something you don't want, but you know what I mean. Just what is it that keeps you going, and the things you cling to about these are the moments that make me feel like, yes, I'm staying in this no matter what, even though you would anyway. And these
I don't want to talk about my lowest moment because there are people I don't want to mention, because it's not a flattering story for a lot of people. But in terms of what keeps me going, it's just I don't know. I just love that I get to do this. Just the work itself is so energizing and joyous. Like, I work for about 2 hours a day going to and from my day job. So I write on the subway train, and I feel like I'm the only person on earth who can do that.
So you literally write while you're traveling to your day job on the subway.
I whip up my laptop, I find a corner seat, whip up my laptop, and I write for an hour until I get to work. And I do that every day. And then I write for an hour on my way back. And I don't know, if I wasn't writing, I just don't even know what I would do with myself. I do it because I don't even know. I can't not do it. I can't imagine not doing it. If my career dried up tomorrow, I don't think I would stop writing comics. I think I would probably just stop publishing them.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. Like, if someone said to you, you have to give up one or the other right now, you give up your day job, right? Even though it's I don't know. I mean, I just...
Oh, yeah. I mean, my comics is good income for me. I'm just saving it all.
Well, even so, I just mean, I remember when I was broke, and it was that sense of, just, I don't know. I mean, one of the things I want to sort of make clear in this episode or this video is just that everybody, I mean, I know you guys, we're friends, and I consider you not, I consider you peers that I look up to and admire, and a lot of the stuff that I know about you personally, it inspires me in the way that the community of people that are in comics, nobody gets into it without tremendous sacrifice, without sort of knowing that, it's going to be rough. No one gets into it for the glamour and the money of comics. Everybody gets into it because they love it, and they started early, and they, knew this is what they wanted to do in some capacity, and you find some circuitous route back to it. For me, I went through prose, got back into comics, and I was older, but you find your way back, and there's no promise of it. It's always, you do it because you love it, because it's an incredibly volatile industry to work in. It doesn't pay a lot, when you're starting or any of that stuff. You do it because it's the way you feel you can be your most you, at the end of the day. So, anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have a day job too. I'm a special ed paraeducator at an elementary school, and I'm struggling. I'm nowhere set financially or anything, and I need that income, but for the health insurance, because I'm not making enough in comics to cover health insurance yet. And despite all that, my job is considering not letting me take enough unpaid leave to go to New York in a month. And I said the words, "Don't make me pick between this job and that trip," knowing full well that would be a very bad decision to make, but I would still make it. It's something you have to do. If once you get bit by it, you have to do it.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, if you think you can do something else and be happy, then go do something else and be happy. Because you do this because you have to do it.
Last year, I got fired for doing Emerald City.
Really?
Yeah, I got fired. I came back from Emerald City and they handed me my pink slip.
That's I don't know, man. I does anyone else I feel like all of us have had those stories as well, where it's sort of I don't know. I mean, I that's the thing I love about this community so much, is that I feel like so often people think that you have an easy ride in, or the right people, or you meet people here and there, but we do know each other from work the same way. My wife is a doctor, right? So she met people in medical school or in college studying medical courses and so on. you commit to it early. The people that you know, like the people I came up with, Sean Murphy, Cliff Chang, Raphael Albuquerque, we came up to get Jeff Lemire is like a huge example. We started, a decade ago, when we were all broke, like coming up together. And it was one of those things where it was like, all of us were having kids or getting married and not knowing how we were going to pay our insurance and not knowing if we were ever going to be, sort of financially viable people in the world, and you make it together. You find a community of people that you feel like we are moving through this and we are making comics together. And if it fails, it fails, but we're in it for better or worse. You know what I mean? We'll go down with the ship that way.
But it's also, too, like, to people who think that it's easy and you know the right people and then that's it, like, you can know all the people you want, but this is the kind of industry where if you don't have the ethic, you cannot force yourself to get up 3 hours before you normally would to write that script, to make sure that it's good, or to send it off, to make the adjustments that they wanted. If you don't give up your weekends, if you don't, call out sick from your day job so you can finish your script, you know what I mean? Like, if you don't have that drive, you're not going to make it. It doesn't matter who you know. It doesn't matter who your daddy is. It doesn't matter. None of that shit matters.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
It is 80% hard-ass work before you ever even think about breaking in, and then it goes down to half really hard work and half just being in the right place at the right time, because you can know whoever you want, but it has to be that right pitch. Like Chris and Mag said, it has to be that right story. I mean, like, I never gave up my job for this, but I certainly gave up sleep. I certainly gave up, being able to see my friends when I wanted to. I certainly, like, those kinds of sacrifices, especially in the beginning, are what it takes. And like Chris, I don't know what work-life balance is. I mean, I'm married now, so I have to have, like, a little bit more, but, like, my wife is very understanding, and sometimes she'll just hang out and, like, watch anime while I write for an extra 4 hours that day because I have to get this thing in. And, like, that's, for me, the hardest thing has been to say no to projects because I'm so frightened that not just that the well will run dry, but, like, that I personally will lose my drive and momentum, which is not true because, again, compulsive. But, like, saying no is hard. And so you line up all these things, and then you're like, well, now I got to produce them all. Now I got to, like, put up.
The overstatement problem is very real.
And then while you're, as writers, you all know this, but while you are writing and spending the time writing, you're also thinking forward. I got to pitch this big publisher, or I got to pitch my next creator-owned thing. And coming up with a creator-owned pitch is a very different animal, and it's very involved, and you're doing both at the same time, right? So it's just constant, even when you are writing one thing, you're already on the next thing.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is. And, like, but the things that make it worth it are, like, all right, I have two. One is I co-wrote an issue, Supergirl, with Steve Orlando, who
Steve's amazing. Adore. I love Steve. Yeah.
I love him so much. And he said to me, I need you to do a story of what you would have needed as a team from Supergirl. Like, what kind of hero did you need? And I was like, cool, bet, I got you. And I got to write an issue of Supergirl in which I introduced a non-binary character of color. And just doing it was incredible for me, but what really made it one of the best feelings that I've ever had in comics is that I've had multiple non-binary people of color come up and say, I've never ever seen myself in anything before at all. I've never seen myself, but I see myself now. And, like, that is the greatest feeling that I have ever had, like, in my life.
Oh, yeah. Kim and Kim provokes a lot of those conversations.
And it's just
I had someone come up to me at FlameCon, like, crying about it. It was really intense.
And it's one of those things, too, where it's like, you're sitting in your room by yourself or in a cafe or on the train. I also write on the train sometimes. And you're writing and you're like, is this meaningful? Is this self-indulgent? And then someone comes up to you, whether it be because of licensed work or creator-owned work, and they're like, you helped me. What you did helped me. And all I've ever wanted to do was help people, and that is an amazing feeling. And then selfishly, my second best is the first time I got to hold a creator-owned book in my hand. You know what I mean? Like, that is bonkers. I'm writing a zombie book in a post-Romero and post-Walking Dead world. Like, I feel like you did with the vampire thing, where it's like, why am I doing this? This is, like, ridiculous. And then you get it in the mail, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's what
I know.
It smells so good. Like,
I know.
All that hardship, like, as long as you're not destroying your soul.
Well, but it is. I mean, like, one of the thing that I started with was sort of the highest moment, lowest moment stuff, and I don't know, maybe it's the reason that we're not talking about, like, the lowest moments and those things, but for me, I know the lowest moments are the moments where I feel like it's very hard to shut off, you know, as a writer. It's very hard to say, well, I'm going to let this go at 5 o'clock and not think about this story the rest of the day, because it sounds stupid, but I believe this pretty firmly, that most people, people always say, like, writers and artists are so weird or they're crazy, but our jobs are really to look at a blank screen and try and think about the stuff that makes us feel really uncomfortable all day long, like stuff that inspires us or stuff that terrifies us, and then make a story out of it where we explore those things on really deep levels, even if they're sort of couched or translated into the language of, like, Lex Luthor and his yellow and his green and purple suit being like, you'll never, and Batman being like, you'll never get away with this. Regardless of kind of whatever lexicon you use, it's still that. It's still about something that makes you stay up at night. And in that way, I just think it provokes a sort of, discomfort from people that do it. And there's a lot of difficulty in that. For me, it's very hard to leave it alone. And the biggest, most consistent fight I've had with my wife and my family, but it's certainly gotten to a point when I was starting at DC, when I was like, just sort of realizing, my wife was my biggest supporter. And when I was working in books, she was the one that was like, you seem happier doing comics. Let me take out a loan against my med school stuff. We're broke. But do comics, because it seems like it's all you've ever wanted to do instead of prose and whatever. And she helped me get in and transition into comics. But once I was in, it was a struggle for a while. And there was a year or a couple years where I was like, the way I can do this is if I write 4 or 5 series, American Vampire spinoff, Detective, Batman, Swamp Thing, all this stuff at once. Because they overlap, because they're staggered, even though if they seem to come out at different times, sometimes you're writing them all at the same time. And, it hurts your life. It hurts your family. Because you're working on things that are so personal, even if they don't seem so to other people, they are. It's the only way you can kind of write anything that matters to you. And then it's very hard to let go at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. So, I mean, I remember, like, my lowest moments, being at Disney World with my kids and totally being present physically, but being absent mentally. And, in the last couple of years, I've tried very hard to correct that and sort of delineate or compartmentalize time for work and time for home. But as a writer and an artist, I feel like it's the most... can you guys speak to that? I mean, is it, like, one of the most consistent problems or not?
I completely, I call it the right looks that you get from your loved ones at times. My girlfriend is the most supportive person in the world, but I'm sure there were times where she thought, when I was busting my ass and saying, well, I'm sorry, I can't do that right now. I have to do this for comics. Trust me, when I go to cons and it looks like I'm partying and spending money, it's not what it's really about. And I'm sure to understand, and that's part of my lowest moments is the struggling and the trying to make it and knowing that I'm going to make it, but at times it sure doesn't seem like it.
Yeah.
And I agree with the kids, like, at their time,
You're breaking up a teeny bit. You're breaking up a little bit. Do you other guys, do you hear him breaking up, or is it just me?
Yeah, you're breaking up on my end.
Really badly. I can't make out a word.
No. Oh no, that's not good.
I actually need to be heading off.
Yeah, well, Mags, before you go, let me promote you and talk about some of the stuff you're doing right now, and also give you, I just want to say, so what do you have coming up? What are the things you're most excited about? I don't know. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to address? I feel like you've also, let me just say, like, flat out, you've been, like, really, we're friends, and you've also been an inspiration to me in both, I think, your spirit, your love of comics, the way that you've, I think you've, held yourself online with everything going on, all that stuff. Like, I really, I just want to say to you, it's been really, a pleasure and also a thrill to watch your career take off. And, it's been inspiring to me to see what you've been able to do on the page and off the page. And I appreciate all of that.
So in terms of things that I want to promote, first, thank you again. That was beautiful. That really means the world to me to hear, because I've been such a big fan of yours since Witches, which is one of my all-time favorite comics.
Oh, thanks.
I've always been really annoyed by it because I had a really similar idea in college. Now I can't ever do it. But you
can do it. You can do it. I promise.
There's so much overlap. There's so much over. No, I'm just not going to touch it anymore.
I promise. I will support. I'll be the first to write you a blurb, so you should do it. And I'll be like, the blurb will be like, this is so different than Witches. It's amazing.
I have a lot, but I have a lot of stuff that's getting announced soon. I have an announcement at the end of the month that I can't talk about. I have 2 things getting announced in New York that I can't talk about, and that's kind of where a lot of my energy is going right now, is towards these secret things. In terms of things that I can promote, Kim and Kim, the Kim and Kim ongoing is still running irregularly because it's Black Mask, and I have a Rick and Morty one-shot coming out next week called Sleepy Gary.
That's awesome.
And Bigger Queen is still running, and that's kind of where I am right now. That's my stuff that I can actually discuss. But I've got like 3 things that are getting announced over the course of the next month or so,
New York?
and then more next year. So.
Well, I'm very, very proud of you, and very not to sound patronizing, because I feel we're peers.
No, totally.
I would say that to Tom King too. I say it to him, like, I'm very proud of you for Heroes in Crisis, all that stuff. So, similarly, I really am. I'm very excited about everything you have coming, and I'm sorry that it's so late. I know you have to go to work in the morning, and that you have, but anyway. It's a real pleasure, and keep us posted on everything you have coming, and we'll just keep promoting it, because I really think you killed it on Eternity Girl and the stuff that you did for us and the workshop and the Wonder Woman, all of it. Like, you're doing great. The Harley stuff.
Thank you so much, and everybody have a great night.
Yeah, take care, Mags. Aaron, you look like you're riding a giant motorcycle on my screen. It looks like. Oh, there you are. All right. So, I know it's getting late. I want to make sure that we cover everything that you guys want to cover. But, again, sort of for me, one of the things that, I don't know, that I'm always interested in is kind of the highest moment, lowest moment stuff. You know what I mean? Like, the moment where you were like, I've done it, I'm in, this is peak. Like, for me, it was like, meeting Frank Miller or when I got to talk to Denny O'Neil about Batman, or those things. You know what I mean? Or meeting Garth Ennis or Neil Gaiman, or those things, and getting to talk comics about all that. like, was there a moment that you were like, this is peak me? I'm so glad I did this.
Well,
And is there a moment when you're also like, yeah, just sort of even now worried, you know?
Well, I share it. I met Frank Miller in New York at the DC party, and he's my favorite creator ever. Every January, I reread Batman Year One and Daredevil Born Again. I think those are two like peak comics of all time. And I didn't want to bother him because everybody was bothering him, but at the same time, I knew that I had to say something to him, or I might never forgive myself. So I just went up and thanked him because I was a huge fan of all of his stuff, and he introduced me to the work of Mickey Spillane, and I read Mickey Spillane for years when I was in junior high because of him. And so we just had a quick talk about Mickey Spillane, and I bounced, and it's one of my best memories ever.
Mickey Spillane, by the way, like my favorite. I saw a documentary on him. I love Mickey Spillane to death. I love all those guys, Dashiell Hammett and the whole.
Yeah, me too.
And there was a documentary on him, and at one point he had 8 of the 10 top best-selling books in the country. And some critic wrote something that was sort of like, you know, what a shame, what a national disgrace. Like this is, you know, and you saw him at a party or something like that. It was in the documentary, and he's like. You know, he went up to him and he was like, I want to tell you, I think that it's just really a sign of like, you know, the decline of the times that you have the top 8, you know, books and whatever. And Mickey Spillane is like, why don't you shut up before I write 2 more books out of like the top 10? It was just the best. And you're like, oh, that guy's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, yeah. The anyway, so what about you guys? Like peak moment. Lowest moment, any of that. Like now that you're in, you're doing it, you're here, you know? Like for me, I mean, I can talk about like my family too. Like my dad, my mom they still go to Midtown Comics downtown. My dad works down near Chinatown at a hospital there, and he goes every Wednesday that I have a comic out and embarrasses me because I'm always like, you're not supposed to be supportive. You're supposed to be like, my son is in comics. That's not what I wanted. I come from like a family of doctors, so my wife, who is a doctor, is like the son my father never had, you know, so they can talk about everything medical at every family function where it's like this infection, and I'm like, you know, but you know, that my highest point is that my, you know, getting to see my family, my you know, sort of celebrate some of the stuff that I've been able to do, but I can still talk about, like, believe me, like I have my lowest points even now, like 100%. So, you know, is that a good question, or is that
yeah, I'll go.
Yeah, go.
I mean, as far as like lowest moments, I still remember I did Emerald City in I think it was 2012, and there was a pro there, and I had my first trade paperback. And he had, at one point, like, he'd given us a pull quote for it, but we never got to use it. So I, like, walked up to him and I, like, thanked him for that. Handed him the trade. And he's like, I don't want to carry that around. And I was like, oh, okay, bye. And, like, that was just, like, my worst show ever. And, like, I wasn't getting work. And, you know, I had, quote-unquote, broken in, but I still hadn't broken in because I was struggling to get anybody to give a shit about me. So, but like the thing about like lowest moments and highest moments is like they keep going. Like I've definitely had some really low moments in comics, and like I don't know which one is the lowest. Like they just, you know, you sort of move up a little bit, and then you're like, oh, I'm actually not as like stable as I thought, and then like something bad happens. Like it could be anything. Like I don't know. I'm very emotionally turbulent, so I'm not the best person to ask. But I mean, as far as high points, like, you know, we got nominated for 2 Eisners for High Crimes, like, and that was you know, that was like 4 years after I had broken into comics, which was. Neither of us, we had joked about it repeatedly, but we never actually expected it to happen. So, like, Ibrahim and I got to go to the Eisners, like, and Lieutenant Dangle from Reno 911 said our names. Like, we lost to sex criminals. Like, that's kind of a brag. So, but like last year, I came out for New York Comic Con and I got to meet, like, very briefly, but I got to meet Grant Morrison and shake his hand, which was like, if anybody's like responsible for sort of dragging me back into comics, it's him. So, but like this weekend, I was tabling at Rose City Comic Con in Portland, and this girl came up and quietly asked to purchase Crowded. And then, like, as I was grabbing it, she just said, like, "Welcome Back is my favorite comic book ever." And, like, in a way that it was like, oh, she really means that. And, like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, it's certainly one of my favorites, and, like, I have a lot of feelings wrapped up in it. And it's just that weirdness of, like, oh, the shit in my head is not, like, it's not just me. Like, that there is...
You're not alone.
There are people out there who get what you're saying. Some people won't, and that's fine, but, like, the people who do and who it hits really hard, like, getting to interact with those people and, like, see that, like, oh, I'm actually, like, having an effect on people is super, like, that, every time that happens, it just kind of blows me away, because, like, I'm not used to it at all.
Yeah, it really is, like, I mean, it's a very high degree of selfishness, you know, when you're writing about the stuff that keeps you up, that makes you upset, all of that stuff, and when you have people come up to you and say, you know, this affected me, like, I can name, you know, any of the stories that I've done on Batman or Justice League or any of it and be like, this is why I wrote it. It was about my, you know, my fears for this. And when you have people come up and say, that's my favorite thing that you did, even if, you know, they're negating other stuff, doesn't matter. It hits you because it is something that you're putting out there in the world and saying, I don't know if anybody else feels this way. Probably not, but you're taking a risk with it, you know, in that regard. So, I don't know. For me, I love going to cons. I know that they're also, like, we've spoken about this before, like, I was joking about it, I think, on another video about how they're, you know, they can be rough, and people have, like, a million backhanded compliments or insults or whatever it is, but I love going there and meeting the people that buy the books and being able to say thank you, and also hearing what they think of them and all of it, even when they're like, you know, don't listen to what anybody says, I think you're good, and then you go home being like, what is everybody saying about me? You know, those.
But at the same time, one of my personal, like, not interacting with someone that reads my work moments was Warren Ellis, like, jokingly threatened my life.
Oh yeah,
like,
how was that?
It was great. I shot my shot and sent them submerged, and he liked it, and he put it in his email blast, which I was getting DMs from, like, mad people because we all subscribe to Warren Ellis' email
Sure,
blast,
yeah, right.
And I hadn't had a chance to open it up yet, and they were like, "Yo, did you see this?" And, like, he said a lot of really, really nice things about the book, and then he went on to say, like, you know, Vita Ayala is the kind of creator that I'll have to murder to get work later on. And I was like, oh, I made it. That's it. I'm done.
It's a good way to go, right? If you showed up, you just be like, do it.
And for me, he is the reason that I got back into writing at a time in my life when I had given that up. It was a rough time. I, too, am emotionally turbulent, I think. There are certain kinds of people that are attracted to the arts, maybe, and we all got things. But I read Transmetropolitan for the first time in that time, and I was like, oh, okay. I guess I have to do it then. That's just what it's going to be.
Well, was there, I mean, that kind of a moment for me, I had like a Stephen King one, or like meeting Grant, that was another one where it was just like, you know, you're sort of expecting them to be horrible or distant or whatever, and then they're nice. And it just blows your mind, and it makes you so encouraged and inspired and excited about the industry in that way, you know? Did you guys,
It also makes you feel like, oh, maybe I am going to make it, because they're normal people too. They're not these weird gods that I've built them up to be. They're just normal human beings, and that means that maybe there's room for me too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, I always thought of Grant or them as sort of, or somebody like Frank Miller. As I remember when I met Frank Miller, and I was like freaking out. It was actually like a favor from Dan DiDio. He had, and not to get too inside the Beltway, but I don't remember what it was exactly. But he had done something that really upset me, and I have like a temper internally, and I had like gotten into a big fight with him. And at some point, he was sort of like, well, we're having dinner with Frank. He knew Frank Miller was like, Dark Knight Returns was my favorite book, and I still have my original 4 things. And he was like, do you want to come out to dinner and meet him? And I was like, you're forgiven. Let's do this, And we went out, and I remember going to the place, to this restaurant in Hell's Kitchen, and Frank coming in and seeing him and having this kind of mythological build in my head of like, this guy is going to be 7 feet tall, and and he came in and he was a normal guy. He was wearing the fedora and that stuff, and there was this huge aura around him in a certain way. But he came up, and I remember I was waiting for this kind of profound thing that he was going to say, and he was like, I read 0 Year, which, blew my mind, and it was our origin of Batman, and he was like, and I love that you gave him a good goddamn haircut. And it was like the best thing he could have said, because it did exactly what you're saying, Vita. It made him, like, he was still awesome and still larger than life, but it also made him like a person that just joked around about, what Bruce Wayne's fucking barbershop haircut is, and it disarmed everything. And then we just got along about everything coming. So, I don't know, that's the best, when your heroes sort of, take it down a notch, and they are who they are, but they're also, they're human. I think like Mark Hamill was one of those, Adam West for me too, at some of the cons. Have you guys had experiences like that? For me, like, I think I told this, but like Adam West, when I met him, and Batman 66, when I was my kid's age, was like Shakespeare, I didn't realize it was campy, and so I loved it to death. And then at one point, I think it was Jim Lee, it was like, do you want to meet Adam West at San Diego? And I was like, oh my god, yes, 1,000,000%. And I met him, and he was wearing like a velvet smoking jacket and kind of a cravat and these sunglasses, and he turned around and he was just like, and they told him, they were like, oh, Mr. West, this is Scott, he's writing Batman and whatever, and he didn't know who I was from Adam, but he turned around and he was like, Scott, now it's a party, and you're like, that's, if I could hear anything from Adam West in my whole life, that's what it would be, and it keeps him who he is, and he's like, so on model, and yet at the same time, he's just so, I don't know, down to earth and human. Mark Hamill was the same way. He was great. So, sorry to go on about it, but is there anything like, for you guys to peak like that, like meeting an idol that just sort of, I don't know, made you feel like encouraged, and, that they were approachable and that you could do this and all that?
I was introduced to Kelly Sue DeConnick by a good friend of mine, Juliet, who's a Valkyrie.
Yeah, I love Juliet. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, she's the fucking best. And I was standing near the table because I was talking to Juliet. She's like, "Oh, have you met Kelly Sue and Matt?" And I was like, "No, not at all, and never will I." And she was like, "Oh no, this is happening." And she like walked me over like a child, and was like, "This is Vita," and I shook Matt's hand. I was like, "I love your stuff. Thank you so much." He talks a lot about depression, which is really important to me because I suffer from depression. And I was like, so thank you for just being you. And then she was like, all right, here's Kelly Sue. And Kelly Sue looked up at me and she was like, I've heard of you. And I was like, oh no, what did I do? And she was like, I really, I've heard The Wilds is good, and I would love to read it, and I'd love to talk to you sometime. And we ended up emailing, and she's the sweetest person, but like, she's someone that I've looked up to for a very long time. Pretty Deadly was incredibly important to me, and her Captain Marvel run was incredibly important. And also looked up to Chris, and meeting him was really, really awesome. You.
Chris, what are you talking about?
Yeah, Mr. Sebela.
Right, I guess so.
Well, now I know you're a normal human being, and that makes it better.
I know. The mystique is gone.
Well, Welcome Back is one of my favorites. it's my favorite thing that you've done, and I love all of your stuff. But welcome back is like super important. So yeah, I don't know. I think more than like meeting my idols, being able to meet people that are working. I mean, Chris is not my peer; he's done a lot more than me, right? But like that are close to being my peers has been the joy that I've had.
Well, we're all. I literally I consider you guys peers. What? Sorry. I thought I heard a. I was gonna say, like, I consider you guys peers of mine, like the same way. I mean, Matt. You mentioned Matt earlier, Vita, and some of the stuff he's doing, some of the stuff Donnie's doing. I mean, people that I saw coming up, that they might have done less, but their work, you see something visionary, you see something inspired, and it makes you want to go home and write better. And so we are all peers, and I see that in all your stuff too. I literally read the Wilds and Submerged, and I read Shanghai Red, and I read Crowded, and what you're doing with Challengers too, Aaron. I mean, I read that stuff, and I go home and I'm like, how do I up my game, in that regard? So, I don't know. I mean, to me, it really is one of those things where, I don't know. I mean, when I met Grant, for example, or Mark Millar, or some of the people that I came up reading, Bendis, for example. But Grant in particular, when I met Grant, and he was just sort of like, what's your idea? What are you doing? And I told him the Black Mirror. I remember, like, the first time I met him was in San Diego, and I was at a DC dinner, and it was 2000, it was almost 10 years ago. It was like 2010, 2009 maybe. And he ran over and he was like, I heard you're on Detective. What are you doing? I won't do his accent because it sounds horrible when I do it. But he told me about what he was doing on Batman Inc. and Batman Return of Bruce Wayne. And then he asked me what I was doing, and I was so scared, and I pitched it to him in the worst way where I was like, it was just a terrible pitch. But he was so encouraging, and he was just like, I think that sounds so interesting. What if you do this, and what are you thinking, and what are you about? And you meet somebody like that, and it makes them, I don't know, it just makes you feel like you can do it. It makes you also realize that even your idols are excited by new stuff and worried about, their stuff and all of it. And it's one big community. I know it sounds really hokey or corny, but it's true for me at least.
No, it's not hokey. I think, like, again, the joy that I've had that has stuck with me the most is meeting friends that are going through the same thing that I'm going through, and meeting people. Again, I don't have a lot of experience in the industry, but people that are trying to, where I was 3 years ago, and being like, oh, that does sound great. I can't wait to read that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm super, super excited to read Lead Eater. So whenever that comes out, let me know, Aaron. Really, really cool. Okay. And like, right on brand for me. I mean, I have two brands, and it's like noir stuff and then like queer and brown. And if they mix, it's great, but it's not necessary because I just love noir as like an entire.
Yeah, me too. It's my favorite.
Yeah.
Well, also, I mean, I don't know. You come up with generations of people. I mean, that's one of the things that I feel like people kind of accuse comics of having this kind of nepotism sometimes, but it was the same in prose, where it's not nepotism because you happen to be at a party. It's nepotism because you guys came up working in the industry and, fighting to get in and reading each other's stuff because you were not competing, but you were, breaking in at the same time. For me, my generation was like Nick Spencer was breaking in at the same time. I was just below Jeff Lemire was breaking in at the same time. Those were my people, like that era. The people that we looked up to, Rick Remender, Jason Aaron, they were like a couple of years ahead of us. But the people that I came up with, that I'm so close with, like Sean Murphy and Art, Jock, all those people, like, you are a generation of creators that kind of comes up together, and you struggle together, and you make it, and all of that stuff. So it isn't just that kind of like, oh, we know each other from whatever. It's that you find each other's work, connect with it, and then you reach out, like I met Jock or I met Sean because I saw their stuff and loved it. I met Jeff Lemire, who's one of my, best friends in the world, because I read some of his early stuff, Essex County and stuff, and reached out to him when I got into Vertigo and said it inspires me. So there are those relationships that you form through work that then carry you through, not only your professional life, but your personal life for years. That it's exciting to me to know that, like, you, Vita, have a relationship with Chris that's outside of, what I know, and that Aaron, you have a relationship also with Chris, and that, I know Mags has a relationship with Heather, and, that's a generation, and my generation is here, and,
Chris is my comics husband. I mean, that's just true. I don't know if he knows that, but that's true. In the same way that Teeny is my comics wife.
Yeah, it's a good threesome.
I like it. It's gonna be fun.
My comics.
I wanted to say too, Scott. Like, I've met a lot of my friends in comics, and we have you in common.
Oh,
So like, I'm really good friends with James Tynan and with Marguerite Bennett, and like I love them so much. And it's like, oh yeah, Scott did this, and like if I hadn't done the workshop, I wouldn't have gotten the chance to get to know Chris in the same way. So like,
well, I appreciate that, but again, like I feel like half my talent is just being able to piggyback on people that I really admire, that I see coming up, and being able to be like, you guys are really good, and please be in my class so I can learn from you and leech off you and that stuff. But James is amazing, Marguerite's amazing, and yeah, I was very lucky to be able to get to know them on the way up. But I don't know. It's one of the things, like I the reason, again, I want to go back. I'll let you guys go because I know it's getting late. We did this once before, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you doing it again. And I know it was completely my fault. I screwed up the sound, all of it. Which, again, like I'll put at the end, like just to show you how badly I screwed it up. Like it's a super animated, good conversation like this one, which I think is probably better than the last one. But I just didn't hit the record button on the QuickTime audio thing, so I was a total fool. But that said, being a part of your guys' trajectory in any way is a huge honor. So I want to just go back to at least let you guys talk about some of the stuff you're working on now, the stuff you're most excited about. But I don't know. I mean, I can talk a while longer too about. We didn't really talk about. I don't know. I don't want to steer the conversation down another rabbit hole, but about those moments when, for me, like when your family realizes that you're okay with this in some way, like that. I don't know. For me, that was a big thing. My parents were always, again, they were very supportive to an embarrassing degree. No matter what I did, I couldn't shake them. But that said, they were constantly really terrified that I was going to be broke like my whole life, and that. And the moment they realized that you're okay was a big thing. The people that care about you, whether it's your parents, your friends, your loved ones, whatever it is, that they kind of see you and say, oh, this person can actually do this okay. Or we can just talk about our work and go, whatever you want.
Well, I don't mind. I can stick around. It's up to you guys.
Yeah, I'm down.
I might want to bounce because my coffee shop closes in 90 minutes, and I kind of want to get a little bit of work done there.
No worries.
I'm totally down to do like a part 2 or something if you want, and we can bring it back.
No, not at all, Chris. Well, we can end too, but just how about if then I'll let you go first in that way, and just be like, what are the proudest moments?
I will add to your whole thing just real quick is that my mom has always supported me, but like was terrified of me getting into comics, and really like the only time I think this year is the first time she felt okay with it because Crowded got optioned, and she understands that. She doesn't read comics, and largely I think thought I was making a huge mistake. So then when I could point to like, look, a movie star in something you've seen thinks it's okay. I mean, she supports my work. She doesn't read it because she doesn't read comics, but yeah. So I don't know, but she hasn't like freaked out at me because I did it. So that's really all I can ask for.
That's
anyhow.
Funny. Yeah, man. Well, I'm sorry. I'm glad that you're going to do work, and I'm sorry to keep you from it. But
no, you're fine.
Keep you from it. But
No, you're fine. I just I don't work well during the day, so as soon as night hits, I start to get twitchy. Anyhow, I'm writing 2 series for Image, Shanghai Red, which wraps up at issue 5, and then Crowded, which is ongoing for the unforeseen future. And I'm also doing a 5-issue horror book at Black Crown called House of Muck with Sean McManus. I'm selling a zine about living in a clown motel.
I love that, dude. I can't wait to read that too. I saw you posting that. That looks great.
Yeah, thank you for retweeting that. I finally put it up on Kindle, so we'll see if I can get the masses to give a
That
credit.
Francesco cover is incredible too.
Yeah, no, I had to wait 3 years for it, but it was worth it. So yeah, I'm just like working on more new stuff forever, and then I'm hoping to take a vacation sometime next year.
Never. It's not gonna happen, Chris.
No, it's gonna just a week. That's all I want. It's not
You're
really-
going to a coffee shop at like late at night to go work for a second shift.
Yeah.
You're working a second shift post dinner. I know your type. You're not going to take a vacation. It's not going to work.
I'll show you. I'll show you all.
All right. It's a challenge. But thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course.
I will talk to all of you soon.
You got it.
See you, Chris.
Later.
So let me ask you guys, and then we can go too if you want. I mean, I love talking to you, so I could talk to you all night. I'm like a dangerous host for this kind of thing. But I don't know. I'm just very excited about what you're doing. I'm very excited by what it means to sort of be breaking in right now. I'm very interested in sort of the challenges and the exciting sort of changes happening in the industry as well. Like, with the not just the direct market, but with trades, with YA, with all of it. So I know you guys have interest in those departments too. But I'll let you go if you want. But if you want to talk about sort of, again, kind of moments when you realize like the people, family moments in that way. For me, that's the most sort of personal note to end on before we sort of push our work. That stuff where you realize like, I don't know, all the people that supported you or that cared about you doing this or that doubted it but still were there for you, when you were able to kind of show them this is what I'm doing and I made it a little bit, and they got to celebrate it with you in some capacity.
Yeah,
sorry if that's like a wandery question. I'm also like, my kid woke up like 3 times last night, so I'm a little bit like, oh.
Oh. If we need to go.
No. I'm going to be up. I have another shift of work as well after this. I just mean like...
Same.
Yeah, right?
It never ends. But that's why it's so cool. My parents and my family have all been very supportive of me no matter what I've been doing. But my mom will also always be like, they're hiring at this place, so you should really apply at this place or whatever. They have good health insurance here, like blah, blah, blah. And when I decided to quit my job in December to pursue comics full time because I had a couple of things going and I literally could not do them and work at this job, it was just impossible. She had a lot of reservations. She supported the work, and she always goes to the comic book shop and buys 2 copies of each issue of whatever I'm But
that's so cute.
She had a lot of reservations, and then she stopped sending me applications to things, and I think that's when I knew I had made it. It was right around the time that I had a 10-page story in the Wonder Woman annual that came out like 2 days before the movie, and so like I gave her a copy, and I was like, "Look, Mom, like I got to write Wonder Woman, and that was my first comic," and she was like, "That's fucking cool. This is like real. This actually is a thing." And then the movie came out, and she was like, "Oh, so you work for DC now?" And I was like, "No, I'm freelance." And she's like, "But you can't. You get work."
Right.
And so like that was around the time that she stopped sending me like government job applications.
Whatever keeps the applications at bay.
Oh my God, yeah. And now, I'm working. I talk to her about what I'm working on when I can, and I think she feels more secure because I've always been a hustler. I have worked in some way or another since I was 15 years old, I've always known how to make my own money. And she understands that it can be applied to comics. That comics is not just pure chance, that hard work really does pay off. And I kind of had to explain to her a little bit, like, I'm really excited about DIY stuff. I'm super into creator-owned, and I'm also super excited about how accessible things are right now. Like, I talk about this all the time, but, like, if you have access to, like, a library, you have access to a way to make comics if they have, like, a computer there with a scanner or something like that. And I talked to her about what Kickstarter was and, like, Gumroad and, like, all these things. And she was like, oh, people can just give you directly money. You don't have to, like, wait. I was like, yeah. This is a thing they can just do. And I encourage other people to just do it all the time. And so, like, she was like, okay, all right. I see.
Yeah, and all the sort of, I mean, all these places that, like, I know what you mean exactly. Like, my parents, they're very supportive, but, like, the mechanics of it are still completely alien to them. But when I explain, like, that right now, I mean, I'm very invested in DC, but there's also this kind of huge sort of landscape that's available to anybody doing indie stuff, where all these platforms are so aggressive for intellectual property, you know, like Netflix, Hulu, YouTube Red, because they all want, like, exclusive content to some extent, you know. There's really a way that you can kickstart Indiegogo, like, you know, self-publish your own stuff and still have some, you know, some visibility to all these different kind of platforms that are excited about, you know, acquiring it. So there's, I don't know, there's just a different level of excitement, I think, around the DIY stuff right now than there was. There was always Image, which is
so cool.
Yeah, and Image has been amazing for years.
For the first time ever, all these places have money they'll give you.
Yeah.
You know, you know what I mean? For a long time, you would create a pitch and hope that you got it somewhere that would give you some money to put out this comic, and those are pretty few and far between. And now all these places have money that they'll give rates, or they'll give a package to, you know, a stipend, that sort of thing. And that's something that we haven't seen in ever, as far as I'm concerned.
No, I agree. And I think that's one of the reasons that it's so exciting, like, being able to be a part of a workshop like the one that you guys were in, or to be able to, you know, just sort of at least see, to have sort of one finger in the landscape of, like, you know, what's going on now with new voices. I mean, it's not just a matter of sort of indie comics, it's a matter of what's going to be the next IP that then becomes the next franchise and all that stuff. I mean, it's a really exciting time. I don't know, for me, like, I genuinely feel like the stuff that's being produced now in the indie scene is going to be the next, you know, TV show on Netflix. It's going to be the next movie. That's going to be the next, you know, big media sort of mammoth. So it really is, like, I don't know, for me at least, it's incredibly exciting to see that whole environment so vibrant right now, and so many people excited, not just about you know, how easy it is to make comics, because it is, like, whether you do it through Image or through you know, different independent companies, or you self-publish, but how sustainable it is, you know, and I know it's risky, and I don't want to, like, sugarcoat it or, you know, wear rose-colored glasses, but that said, there's more viability to it than when I was younger. You know, I mean, you couldn't make an indie comic and then have, you know, some company or some app or whatever it is, like, be interested in it, where now you can. So there's...
And that also, too, like, you know, I mean, this is not to kind of say that things weren't accessible if you had that confluence of hard work and luck, but, like, right now, there are so many more people, like, working in comics visibly that look like me.
Oh, yeah.
Or that, you know, that might not have had the same opportunity if they didn't have the tools in which they could produce a self-published thing first. And show that they had the chops to be able to do something. And that shit is so fucking exciting to me. Like, that's the stuff I get up for. Like, I like reading my friends' stuff, and I like seeing what people are so driven to make that they will do it without anyone's help.
Yeah, it's like the means of production in comics are now available to so many people that they weren't before. that it makes the whole sort of bookshelf of it so much more exciting, where you hear new voices. I mean, and you hear sort of, takes on, the superhero genre, even if it's done independently, that are so unique. All of it. It's like, I don't know. I mean, for me, it really is like the best time ever to be a comic book fan. And I know it sounds hokey, but it's true. Like, to be able to see it so robust and so inclusive and so big, and to see so many new voices emerging in the indie scene and the self-published scene, and to know that DC, my job for a while doing the class and that stuff was to be able to recognize talent that was brought in from other places, and then help guide them towards superhero stuff, our properties. But just to get like the smallest taste of what was out there through that. And I try and keep pretty active in terms of reading stuff in many venues. But even so, like just seeing it through that narrow scope, where I know people like live in that world all the time, it was so exciting, because that stuff not only was comics much narrower when I was a kid, but it just wasn't, the access to it, like the means to make a comic weren't as available. And now it just feels like you can do it if you're out there and you want to be a comic book writer, want to be a comic book artist. There are ways of connecting with, the other people that can help you do that. Whether if you're an artist and you go in DeviantArt or Pencil Jack or any of that stuff and find people, you go to cons. Or if you're an artist and you're seeking writers, same thing. Like, a lot of us, like with DC, my job at DC was I have two contracts. I have like a writing contract, and I have kind of a corporate aspect to my employment there. Part of that is story development. Part of it was teaching this class, and that part of it was like, was talent development. And the thing I'd say is the fact that they're willing to pay me to do that means that they're deeply committed to finding new voices out there. So if you're somebody that's watching or whatever and wants to make a new comic, and they found people for that class and that they were interested in for their workshops that were just starting out, that had self-published stuff, but that had a real voice. So they're constantly looking and aggressively seeking, new writers, new artists. So it's not, they need it to stay fresh, So it's not one of those things where you're just working in a vacuum. I mean, all these big places, whether it's DC or Marvel or, YouTube or Netflix or Hulu or Sci-Fi, they're all extremely eager right now for kind of new, visionary, singular work. So for me, it's like the best time to be involved in it, and the most exciting time to see sort of what's being produced. But, I know there's a lot of what's happening to the market, what's happening to comics, but I'm sure I'm insulated and naive. But in terms of the stories being produced and the kind of excitement around them, it's a really great time.
I mean, there's change, right? Like, there's a lot of fear because change is scary and change, it means upheaval. But if you are making comics out there, whether they're self-published or through a publisher, you're making comics. You are a comic creator, period.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
No.
Do you remember a time when there wasn't all these, when nobody was talking about how comics were ending and comics were dying? I don't remember a time when that wasn't discussed. So we're still around.
No, and the weirdest part is, like, I get the whole argument, and the comic stores do close, and I understand, like, the hardship of the direct market, the variants, all that stuff, 100%.
Sure.
But that said, like, they're also, the trade market, the YA market, like, digital, there are all kinds of things that are also things we can't talk about that are machinations within, DC that you hear about and that stuff, too, that are really exciting, that are, I don't know, that it evolves. It doesn't mean like I'm all brick and mortar comic store. That's my LCSs and that stuff. Like, I'll never leave. And I think there are ways that those stores grow and thrive and all of that stuff. And a lot of that is on us to produce great stuff. And when we fail, we fail. And I get it. But I'm just saying there are a lot of also interesting mechanics, I think, to the industry as a whole right now. and hopefully they're all confluent. That one thing, the rising tide raises all ships. And it's not just one isn't at the expense of the other. The stuff that's being planned or digital or indie doesn't mean that a brick and mortar comic shop is going to suffer, or doesn't mean that a different sort of tributary of how we sell is going to be hurt by that. That one thing will help the next, and that. So I don't know. I mean, I really do feel like it's more people know geek culture, know these superheroes, know TV shows and movies and series made from indie stuff than ever before. So it just feels like the ripest time, even if some aspects of it are really scary right now.
I was just talking to Sarah Miller about how we live in a time where my 7-year-old daughter knows who Katana is.
Yeah.
And I never thought we would be here. And it's amazing. She thinks it's awesome that I worked on Green Lanterns because she knows Jessica Cruz from DC Superhero Girls. That's amazing to me.
Well, and that's one of the things I'd say is that, the takeaway for me from all this is that, there, on the one hand, one of the things I really wanted to communicate with this, and I think, I hope it was clear this time. Last time I sort of discovered as we were talking, and then this time I might have tried to steer it a bit, but it's just that nobody gets into this because they're carpetbagging or because they feel like, comics is such a glamorous money-making thing. We're all in it for love of the craft, and we all make sacrifices. And, I kept harping on, like, what's your worst moment? And we didn't get into it too much, but I know you guys, and I know the lows that we've all hit, over the years, where we all feel like we're not going to be able to do this. What are we doing with our lives? We're not making, we're working 2-3 jobs, not making it. And, nobody goes into it because they find it, glamorous. They go into it because they love that mode of storytelling in that way. And then secondarily, I think the thing that you're talking about, Aaron, too, is that right now, the thing that's so exciting about it is that so many people are getting into it because of the attraction of the movies and the sort of celebration of geek culture across pop culture, that it's so vibrant. I mean, when I was a kid and I went to Comic-Con in New York, it was at the Roosevelt Hotel across from Penn Station. It was a bunch of guys with long boxes, and that was it. Now you go to the Javits, and it's like a multi-screened, multi-roomed, hundreds of thousands of people extravaganza, and that's incredible. When I see little kids coming up that are, girls, all walks of life, all demographics, that's different. That wasn't there when I was a kid, and that's deeply exciting. That to me, this has a future that goes beyond, what it was when I was a kid. And the sales, the direct market, I understand the fluctuation. I understand, we all want everything to do really well, and we're doing our best. But there's a lot of exciting signals, also around, and those have to do with new voices, new venues, new all that too, and classic stuff too. This is in no way the thing I'm trying to say is that one isn't, in my opinion, and maybe I'm naive and wrong. So anyone out there that wants to argue with me. But I don't feel that one is at the expense of the other. I feel you can have giant, bombastic superhero stuff, and within that line have experimental books, and then also have a line of books that are deliberately for young readers and deliberately for mature readers with Black Label, and bifurcating the stuff and having it be sort of something for everybody is a healthier, bigger industry. And that lately I feel like so often we say, well, this kind of book hurts my book, or this kind of book is taking away oxygen from what I want. And there really is room for all of it if it's done right, in a way where you can bring in more people, make it a healthier, more diverse ecosystem. And
absolutely. I mean, my favorite thing when I was working at a comic book shop was to find a book for whoever walked in the store, even if they didn't know that they needed a book, right? So we get a lot of people coming in, parents or at the time when I first started working, women going, I'm buying for this person. And I'd be like, all right, but what do you like? Because I bet you there's a comic for you.
Yeah.
And it was true then, and that was, I started in 2004, and I worked at Forbidden Planet until 2014. But it's even more true now. There is something for everybody, and no one is forcing anyone to buy any book in particular. Or if they are, then they're doing comics wrong, right? They're selling comics wrong.
Yeah, well, exactly what you're saying, Vita. I mean, that's the takeaway for me is really just that there's something for everybody right now. Like there's Swallow Me Whole for like my mom. There's March for my father. And then there's for my kids. There's Hush, and there's something for everybody. And that's the thing that I feel like it can get so contentious right now and so ugly, but it's so, on the other hand, it's just such a amazingly vibrant sort of landscape of work that there is room for all of it in that way too. I don't know. I mean, I must have met you at Forbidden Planet, by the way. If you were there, I feel
we've
like
definitely seen each other a couple of times.
All right. Okay. I know. I must, because I still go in there because I grew up down by there, but my parents live on the Upper East Side now. But even so, my father works not far from there, so I go down and visit him, and I always stop by Forbidden Planet, even like 5, 6, 7 years ago. So I feel like I must have met you and seen you. So.
I told this story last time too, but the first time I met you was, I think it was 2010. When did the first issue of American Vampire come out?
Yeah, 2010. That's right.
It was 2010, and it was San Diego or Philadelphia. I forget which one, because that was a very long time ago. And I was setting up a booth because I was working like a vendor, and we had your book, and you walked by, and you're like, I wrote that. Do you want me to sign it? And my boss wasn't there, but I was like, yeah, sure. Like,
that sounds like me.
Because you were so excited. You were like, I wrote that book, and there it is. I'm like, yeah, all right, like, cool. And I'm a vampire fan. I'm disappointed with myself that I didn't buy it, but
it's okay. I remember that year, like being at C2E2 and a couple cons with Raphael, and we would just like give the book to people for free, and I would watch them like walk and then throw it out, and then I would go to the garbage, take it out, like brush it off, bring it back to the table. So the fact that you're even nice about it means the world to me. So, but that does sound like me. I definitely was like, I wrote that. Do you want me to sign it? I'm still that way.
There's a picture of us somewhere, like an actual physical picture of us, like with the book between us. And like,
yeah, I'm sure I look much better, like years off my life between then and now. But I remember like to this day I still have that urge when I go by like a comic booth at a con. I see they have anything Batman. I still am like, I wrote that. Do you want me to sign it? Because you feel so lucky to do it.
Funny, yeah. It's just like I have my name in this thing. This is my thing.
I know. I mean, I don't know. We were all very lucky. That's the takeaway again is that I know you guys well, and I'm very excited to be in an industry with you and call you peers. But the sacrifices have been there, and the fact that you get to. I know how excited you all are too to be able to be working in it. And I really hope that everybody watching this will go check out your work because it's terrific. I'm so proud of what you're doing and having been able to just watch even from a distance with it. So I think you're making the industry much better through your work and through who you are and all that stuff. So I'm very honored to have you back on. And I'm sorry I screwed up the first time around too. I promise this time will be good. And the sound will be crystal clear. It's going to sound amazing. So
fair enough.
Yeah. So anything else? Anything I didn't cover that you guys want to plug now that it's just the three of us too? We can badmouth Mags and Chris also now that they're gone. We can just talk about them and be like, what an asshole.
Yeah, how dare they both be so good at what they do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Fuck that.
Oh my God.
Matt too, by the way. I know we're all friends with Matt. I know. Bastard for being really good.
Yeah. That's another guy who, again, create our own stuff. I love franchise stuff. I grew up on franchise stuff, although I would unknowingly buy indie books. I just didn't know. I would just, if I had the money, I was spending it. But like right now, create our own stuff is where it's at, and like Matt Rosenberg does some really good creative.
Oh yeah, 4 Kids, Enter a Bank.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so much.
So
Well-
good. We Can Never Go Home. My favorite has been, I mean, 4 Kids is now my favorite of his, but
We Can Never Go Home is great
called
too. Yeah.
Menu. Have you read that one?
No, I didn't read that.
That was a South Pub book, and that it's about a boy and his dog in the post-apocalypse, and they're vignettes, they're tiny stories, and there's just like a million of them, and some of them are funny, and some of them are fucking like heartbreaking, and each story is drawn by a different artist, and it's just one of my favorite
Oh,
things.
cool! I'll check that out.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll check it out too. Well, let me ask that then, as maybe like a final thing before we go, is like, what are you reading, or what new voices have you discovered? Or and again, like, no pressure if it's late and whatever. But are there any books that you've discovered by people that sort of surprised you, that are new, upcoming, emergent, artists, writers that you want to plug before we go?
I'm reading my friend's stuff right now.
Yeah, let me.
I
can go.
to buy like books that like in like singles, so I always buy in trade. But I try and read stuff by people that I came up with because I just love them and want to support them.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. I mean, I have like, there's a book, Samurai Grandpa, by a student of mine, Easton DeVerne. Yeah, he's awesome. Ryan Lindsay, also, who was in one of my. Yeah, he's incredible.
I have Eternal here actually somewhere.
Yeah, right. Joey Esposito.
Eternal, so good.
What?
Eternal's great.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, and what? Oh, you have it right there. Look at that.
Oh yeah. This is god, so good.
Yeah, the Joey Esposito. I love his stuff as well. He had what was it? The book where it's a Bigfoot detective. It was.
Oh my god! Yeah.
Footprints. I think it was Footprint, right? It was like.
That sounds right.
Yeah, it was great. Like, he's terrific. I don't
I have
know.
a buddy of mine who's like breaking in right now, and he's doing pages. He's a cartoonist, so he does it all. Right? He's one of those wizards that like can write it and draw it. And
one of those assholes.
Yeah, one of those fuckers. And he's showing me pages, and he's a real comics head. Like he's like, I have this universe divided into eras, and I'm doing this era right now. It's like the 90s-ish stuff, and then I'm going to do the 50s, and like back and forth. His name is Raymond Salvador. I retweet his art all the time because it's
Raymond
so good.
Salvador.
Like, yeah, I'll send you.
Yeah, send me his stuff, will you? That'd be great.
He's so good. We're actually trying to work on a book together, but like his personal stuff that he does all by himself blows my mind. He is such a student of the craft, not just like how to impart his story in terms of his writing, but also like he'll sit and study like pages. Like, he's a big Kirby fan, and he's like, oh, this is how you get motion from panel to panel and draw an eye, and like
That's awesome.
he'll study this guy's colors, and like it's stuff like that blows my mind because that again is a labor of love. Like, no one's paying him to do this.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
because he loves comics.
Well, and like on the art side, I can think of times like that too, where I've been working with people, and you realize sort of the amount of effort that goes into it. That you're like, because I'm always like, oh, I wanted to be an artist. Then I remember talking to Raphael one day when we started American Vampire, and I was like, what are you up to? Are you around to chat? And he's like, oh yeah, I was just drawing hands. And he showed me this page he was doing, and it was all hand studies, like these beautiful. And you're like, this is 9 a.m. in the morning till 12. He was just drawing hands, and you're like, that's. Like you're saying, it's the student of the craft, student of like, how do I get better at what I do? And
Emily Pearson, my co-creator of The Wilds, does stuff like that all the time. She's a baby. She was like 20 when she first started drawing it, and she's like 22 now. Like, in each issue, you can see all the work that she puts into it. But like the last issue, which is coming out, I think this month or early next month, like. It was giving me some serious, like, Charles Burnsy kind of, like, vibe. And I was like, Emily, please, like, I can't handle how good you are. You're only 22. Like, don't do this.
It's amazing. It looks fantastic. It looks fantastic. Again, like, anyone not reading it, read it. And read Submerged as well. They're both great books. So
I was going to say, Lisa Serrell, who is my co-creator on Submerged, that the poor woman, I made her draw so many trains. There's so many fucking trains.
There are a lot of, subways.
And like what she has the ability to make looking at that interesting. You know what I mean? Not just for mood, but just the like what she does with the paneling and then also the art in the panel blows my mind. She's incredible. She does a series with her husband called Long Lost.
Long Lost? Okay.
Woo, so good. So good. So good.
That sounds great. How about you, Aaron? Is there anything...
I also want to plug... I want to plug my buddy and fellow talent development workshop alum, David Campo.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Oh yeah,
called The Margins, and it's really good. It's really good. I highly recommend it to everybody.
The
And then,
Margins.
I don't know how much I can say about this. He's not a new voice, but I'm excited because he's new to Creator Own. Good buddy of mine, Dennis Hopeless, is co-writing a book with Jason Aaron that will be out soon through Image, and it's good. And I think Dennis has got one of the best voices in comics, and I can't wait for people to see his Creator Own stuff. So I'm excited about that too.
I like Dennis a lot. He's great.
Yeah.
He's a really sweet guy. Yeah.
He's a good dude.
I'm trying to think like other people that were in the workshop or people that I'm really excited about having stuff out. I think, Ryan. I think Michael Morisi, he's great too. He did some stuff for us.
Yep.
Yeah. Sanya was terrific too. Sanya
So
Anwar.
good.
Yeah. 1,001 Nights. I'm trying to think who else I can mention that was in there. I mean, there's so many people.
Ryan Katie.
Oh, yeah.
He was one of yours.
Ryan Katie, he was incredible. Yeah. I feel so embarrassed that I had such a incredible array of talent in there, and now they're all kind of doing such great stuff. But yeah, no, I mean, again, I think if anything, I hope people walk away feeling excited about not just sort of the big two, which again I'm excited about, but just the whole landscape of of everything happening in comics. And most of you guys have sort of multiple things happening, some licensed, some indie, all of it. And that it is one of those things where I hope that people walk away feeling like there's something for everybody. And the most exciting thing is discovering a book or a new writer, new artist that makes you feel like the whole industry is new all over again to you and exciting. So you guys certainly have done that for me. I'm very proud to know you and get to call you peers. So I know it's late, but I'm glad we did this again. I feel like the total of it, I feel like we must have talked for 5 hours or 6 hours. So.
Maybe.
Wait, before we finish, I want to know.
Yeah.
I want to hear your plug, Aaron. What you're doing?
Oh yeah, you. What
My
do you?
plug? Oh, so I just wrapped the last issue of New Challengers. Will be out next month, and I'm talking about what I'm going to do next. And I'm hitting Creator Own pretty hard right now. I'm working on a project right now called Lead Eater, and I'm a little nervous about it. I'm trying to get an issue in the can before I really do much with it because I'm just so nervous about it. But I think it's great, but of course I do. It's really dark, it's really bleak, and at times it's really hard to work on because of that. But it's all about where I grew up and some of the crimey shit that happened around there, and only filtered through this dirty cop crime thriller. So I'm pretty excited about it.
I'm excited for you, dude. I'm sure it's going to be great. I can't wait to see it. Send me an early thing, and I'll post about it.
Yeah, the artist Brooke Turner's turning in some pretty amazing pages and stuff right now. So I can't wait to start showing it around.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. All right, you guys. Well, I know it's super late. I really appreciate it, and I'll keep plugging your stuff and all of that too because I love you guys, and I'm very, very grateful to, again, have you on, but also just be a small part of the bigger story that's going to be your great career. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anytime.
Yeah.